You don't see a square and they're saying select a camera, do you?
No.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
all right, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracy, Attorney Tracy Martin, and our honored guest, Judge Leonia Lloyd. And you know, we always have a mug. And so I have a mug today that says, "All things are possible to those who believe," Mark 9:23. And I'm drinking green tea. So welcome.
Very
Well,
good. Sounds yummy,
hi.
Robyn. Hi, and I'm Tracy Martin, aka TM Martin, and welcome to Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracy. And please like and subscribe to our new YouTube channel. We're going to be rolling out a new website momentarily with some merch. And we, yes, Robyn, are very honored today to have with us in the house the Honorable Leonia Lloyd, who is a public speaker and author whose career as a judge, lawyer, and teacher has spanned decades serving the citizens of Detroit. Having sat on the 36th District Court for more than 20 years, Judge Lloyd has lived a life with many stories to tell, which are captured in her exciting new memoir, Your Honor, A Journey Through Grief and Restorative Justice. Her award-winning justice programs for substance users and sex workers has been featured on the National Geographic Channel, A&E Network, and in the Detroit Free Press. She is a product of the Detroit Public Schools and received her bachelor's and Juris Doctorate degrees from Wayne State University. But before becoming a judge, she was a partner in the law firm Lloyd & Lloyd, which she shared with her late twin sister, Leona. They were featured in Ebony, Jet, and People magazines, along with the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News. Both she and her sister would go on to be elected to serve on the 36th District Court and be the country's first twin judges to sit on the same district court bench at the same time. And they were affectionately dubbed Twins for Justice, a trend that we see now, Robyn, right? With a lot of sisters and brothers ascending to the bench. Welcome, Judge Leonia Lloyd. How are you today?
Yes,
I'm
welcome.
fine. I'm fine. Thank you, both of you, for having me. It's truly my honor. Thank you.
Yes, and I read your bio. It was very impressive. And then, you know, that with you and your sister, what you've done, and then being an author and just the community programs. And so, you know, when Tracy suggested that we invite you on, I said, oh yeah, that she would be great for our show. We have this show, Political Coffee. You know, Tracy is an attorney and has a background as a journalist, and I'm an attorney and I have a background as a community activist. I do a lot of programming, community programming. So we said, oh, we want to definitely get her on here and talk to her. You know, I would start with saying, so what motivated you to become a lawyer?
Well, back when you know, I was in college and we were about to finish college, but it was during the time of the civil rights, you know, era. And we were looking at television, looking at these shows. We saw lawyers that were trying to make a difference in the lives of Black folks. Okay, and this was also at the time the Black Power movement was really taking place. And so we said, I want to do that. I want to help people. And as much as I wanted to be a teacher and help mold the minds of young people, now I'm looking at goal number 2, which is I want to be a lawyer. And my sister was sitting there with me. She says, so do I. And so, you know, wasn't unusual for the two of us to think very similar things. And we said, well, we got to finish what we started, which is finishing school and going on to be a teacher. And when I said, but I want to go to law school, Leona wanted to go to law school. And as soon as we started teaching, she said, as soon as I pay for this car, because she had no car and I had a piece of car. And so she said, as soon as I finish paying for this car, she said, I'm ready to go to law school. I said, so am I, because we both had new cars and we were on a time frame, 4 years, it would be done. Bam, we were in law school as soon as we finished. And so that's what motivated us, with all the social climate that we were in, the things that we saw happening, the Black Student Union that I belonged in, and the protests and things that I participated in, all of that played a part in looking down the road as to helping change things for Black people. And I saw that the road as being a lawyer would be that. And that was the turning point for myself. that's what I wanted to do, as well as teach.
Your Honor, congratulations on being the cover girl for, I believe, this month's Speaker magazine.
Right, right.
You're
Yes,
also a
congratulations.
motivational speaker and a public speaker, and anyone who wants to get in touch with you, I've noticed you've got this great website that people can get in touch with you if they need you to come out to their event and speak and inspire people.
Right. Pam Perry, my publicist, helped create that wonderful website that you see. I am
I
not
love
that
the
talented.
colors.
Yeah, the website was awesome with the coloring and everything. And just again, you have a very dynamic background. And, I teach at EMU, and I teach a class on law and African-American experience. And I've been teaching a lot of African-American females, and I've been encouraging them to go to law school. And so I definitely will share that with my students.
Okay.
Because it was very inspirational as I reviewed that.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
one interesting thing, well, there are many interesting things in your book, but your book, your memoir stands, I noticed, from the 1940s until now. And I personally think that it's a must read for anybody who's interested in the law, and also treatment and healing. In
Right.
the United States today, so much is going on the political spectrum. There's such a divide. Everyone's polarized. And then from the social aspect, we've had this opioid epidemic. And I know that you were so instrumental with your drug treatment court and veterans court. I mean, what would you say to people today in terms of, going through this pandemic? That's the other big thing in terms of healing and restorative justice. How can they use principles of restorative justice to help themselves?
Well, if in fact a person, has done a lot of things, or possibly some things that they need to straighten out, straighten out their life. And sometimes people get stuck in a rut because the legal problems that they have, makes them do things that end up destroying their life. They can't get past that. And then they end up, using, be it substances, et cetera, particularly now in the climate when we have people living in a pandemic bubble. And I know a lot of people are getting depressed. The ones that are already depressed are becoming more depressed, possibly suicidal. And then you've got people who are already on the edge. That's usually when they grab substances and things of that nature, because it doesn't make the problem go away, but it just kind of ties them over, and they don't worry about it as much. But the problem doesn't go away. It just gets worse because you're not doing anything about it. So the climate that we're in today, and I think about it often when I look at some of the reports that come on television, and I see people doing a lot of things that cause the pandemic to progress. And a lot of that is out of frustration. A lot of that is out of feeling pent in because the freedoms that we all had walking around wherever we wanted to go, whenever we wanted to do it. Oh, I think I'll fly to this island. I think I'll go over here. You don't think about it. You just do it. You just go to the airport if you got the money. Go to the airport, or you save for it. Your dream trip. And even cruises. I mean, I used to love cruises all the time, and I went on several with my sister. And the thing about it is, we like to island hop. But when that boat caught the virus, and all I could think about is how confined you are. Even if you've got a nice suite, you're still confined, and stuff spreads on that boat. I was on the boat one time, and I caught a cold from my clerk. And right before I left, I said, "Look," she would not come. She said, "I don't have sick days," and so I said, "Okay."
Wow.
But I caught it, and my reporter caught it. She was on the trip too, and she got violently sick. Violently
Wow.
sick. Missed a couple of islands, and she couldn't get off. I had a touch of it, but I had a couple of antibiotics, and I went to see the doctor on the ship, and they said, "All we give out is Tylenol. We don't do anything else." And I said, "Well, what if there's something else wrong? You just have to wait till we dock." And that's when I found out that those doctors on that boat is not like what you think. So and when people came down with the virus, I really felt sorry for them because they couldn't help me with a cold.
No.
The Lord
Wow.
helped the people who had a virus. And so everything has changed. Everything has changed, which you all know, even in the
Yes.
court system. And I said, well, I retired from there, but I listened in at court on some of the cases, and everything is slowed down to a different pace than if in fact you were there live. So to me, someone sitting watching it, it's like watching paint dry. Okay. And so I said, wow, that has to be difficult for all the parties involved, but you're trying
Right.
to keep going. You're trying to make it. But what toll does that play on everybody? What toll does it play on a judge? One judge told me, Judge, I'm so tired when I finish for the day. She said,
Right.
I'm really drained. She
They
said,
call it Zoom fatigue. I've heard they call it Zoom fatigue, Your Honor.
Zoom fatigue.
so
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can relate. I had the
It's
last
real.
couple of days because I do a lot of work at 36th District, and the last couple of days I've had like maybe 5 cases and different it's at 36 and Frank Murphy, and I have like 5, and I have like 5 different devices, and I do have my my partner Ed Taylor will help me, but it's intense. It's like craziness. I mean, it's better than actually having to physically go to those places. But it's also really intense. I mean, I don't know, they talk about it with the kids in school, like you kind of feel funny after looking at screens all day,
Right. And I can understand, on one hand, yeah, you don't have to get up and go through the rigmarole to get to work on a certain time because you get so paced like a clock. It's just second nature to you. Now you don't have to do any of that. Okay. And you could be sitting there, not necessarily with a robe on, but it's just more relaxed. But because everything kind of slows down, it's that pace. And like you said, you're several different places almost at one time. And for a lot of people, that can become overwhelming. It can become overwhelming. And a lot of occupations, I look at the folks that are out of jobs, don't know when. And that's the problem. You don't know when something is going to stop. You don't
Right.
know if it's going to get better. And then when you turn on the news, instead of hearing something positive, you hear about these variants and this variant over here and this variant over there. And it's like, is this another thing coming to? And we haven't finished with the one we got. We
And
haven't,
Judge,
yeah.
Judge, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I do know that publicly you mentioned yesterday that you were scheduled to go for your vaccine this morning. And I'm wondering if you were able to achieve that and how you're feeling and, what your thoughts are on vaccines right now, especially for people who are going to court.
Right. Well, I went and it was fine.
Good.
I was at Henry Ford. I was at Henry
Oh,
Ford
okay.
Hospital. And I was like right in the beginning when the doors open. So, and they take people in quickly, et cetera. Now, and that doesn't mean it's going to be that smooth when it gets to be about noon, when more people want to come in, but I was out there when it was, the snow was coming down and stuff. So,
Okay.
but it went fine. In fact, I was preparing for the worst because I had a shingle shot before, and that thing hurt going in until I made sound effects. Okay, when
Oh, really?
yes, and then you get 2 of those too, and in my arm, it wasn't just hurting. I mean, it hurt the second one to the point where I couldn't lift my arm, and I had to wear ice packs on it. I wrapped it in gauze and I wore ice packs. So I thought, if that was shingles, what's this going to be? Okay, so, but the man who administered the shingle shot told me, but he hadn't done any of these shots yet. He said, shingles is the worst. He said, of all, I said, well, I've had flu. I've done flu shots for 20 years, et cetera. So none of that bothered me, but shingles, I can't tell you it didn't bother me. It did, it hurt a lot. So I wasn't ready. I didn't know what I would be walking into this morning. And so I got there, and then they're very, very polite, very nice. And and I can't look at a needle. I'm one of those people. I can't.
That's me. Wait. That's me right here.
My mother was a registered nurse, but I can't. I will, even in high school, my sister and I, how in biology, and you're putting the little pen in your hand, and you're supposed to spread the blood on the little piece of glass to see what type blood you are. The two of us were about to pass out, and the teacher had us put our heads down between our legs and all that. And she said, we
Wow.
didn't even know we were getting ready to pass out. She said, the two of you. So I told my mother, I can't be a registered nurse, Mom. I can't stick people. So even today, you know, the lady, I was watching all these shots, like last night when people get these shots. And I said, oh God, that's a love. Looking at it, right? When I got there and I turned, and the lady said, well, you wore the right kind of shirt. Yeah, she could get right to me. She'd have to, I had to pull it.
Good.
And so she did boom, and she said, okay. I said, what, you finished? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, wow, I didn't feel that.
You barely noticed it, right? That
Right,
was my experience. That was my experience too. I ran down yesterday, and in order to go back to court, really, I need my health passport. I need to get the vaccine. So I made an appointment on Thursday. They said, hey, we got an opening Friday. My husband took me down, long lines, but there was a smooth process at the TCF Center in Detroit. And I really didn't feel anything, and I've had no side effects. I did feel a little bit of soreness at the injection site, but it was very minor. So, I recommend everybody, who can get it to get it. And what I found interesting is when I was there was someone, I don't know if you can see it because of the green screen, but there was a worker who advised me to sign up for V-Safe. And it has a QR code, and that way they can track you, and you can provide information about how you're feeling, and it just helps with the whole process. Did they tell you about that?
I had that too, because I got my shot on February 5th, and I went to the TCF Center. We waited in line for 2 hours, and then I'm set to go back on March 5th. And I felt it when they gave me the shot, and I did feel sore the next day, but I didn't have, what I'm hearing from folks is that if some people get the second shot and they don't have much of a reaction, but some people do get the second shot and they get a reaction, and they might take like cold medicine. They might feel feverish for, like my doctor said, she felt feverish for 12 hours and then she was okay after that.
Which one did you get?
I got Moderna.
Okay,
Me too.
I got Pfizer. And I guess that's because of the cold storage thing, and Henry Ford probably has that capability. So that's probably why they have those there. Because they don't ask you what you want, it's
right.
You're there and
they
you get the card.
Like, we're gonna give you what we got. We gonna give you what you got.
But you know what, Your Honor and Robyn, I did read recently that when you go back for your second shot, if you get the 2-shot dosages that are required, that you need to take the same one. So don't get a Pfizer the first shot and get Moderna the second. You have to stay Pfizer, Moderna in order for it to be effective. This is what I understand.
And I've heard a lot of comments about the second shot. Most of the people I've talked to, nobody I've talked to's had a problem with the first one.
Good.
But even my doctors, I've got 3 doctors I go to all the time. And so I said, before I say yes to any shots, I'm going to ask all 3. I have allergies to different things. I have a low immune system. So I said, I've got to make sure that this doesn't conflict with my health to the point it does something to me to lower this or lower that. And every last one of them said, get the shot. And I said, okay. And I said, well, which one is better? They said, the one you can get. I said,
okay, great.
That's what the pharmacist said, because somebody said, oh, you should try to get Moderna. Was a sister involved? The pharmacist was like, okay, well, my daughter's a nurse and she got Pfizer because she's directly in, working with folks that have COVID. So she got Pfizer. He said, most likely Rite Aid will get Moderna, but he, like you said, get what you can get. Because you probably have heard in the news, there are reports of Black folks that want the shot. And I've even seen it in Wayne and Washtenaw. They want the shot and they're not able to get the shot.
Right. If you can get the shot and you check with your doctors, they say they give you the green light, because it's like this. I talked to a friend on Facebook, and he said his doctor told him either get the shot or get COVID. Which one you want? And I said, well, when you put it like that,
right.
I said,
it's a no-brainer.
Right.
Right.
And then, we've been all living in a bubble, like, and you all maybe not as much as me because you're going to court, you're trying to do different things, trying to get out there to handle your job and your business. And I can sit in and not go except maybe to the stores when I've got to go. But it's a different kind of environment, when you're walking in, you got that mask on. And I said, well, it isn't the most comfortable thing to wear, but it is a difference between that and getting sick. And the thing is that I know some people have to wear it all day because of their jobs. And I really feel,
Right.
I said, I hope they're picking something that after going through several different masks, you find what fits you, you find what's comfortable but safe for you to protect you all day if you've got to be out there. Because I take my hats off to all of the workers that are out there every single day trying to service everybody else, and they're out there in the exposure, and I just take my hat off to them, because of that we all should be very, very careful, not because if the more contagious everybody becomes, you're going to these stores, the first people that you see are these folks.
Right.
They're the ones, they're trying to help everybody, and but they're the ones that are the most vulnerable. So if people just have to weigh now their own personal interests, of being happy that you've always had, that's a luxury that everybody took for granted, that they could just do whatever they wanted to do. Well, you can't, and you got to think about, everybody else next to you. You got to think about
It's a
other
new day.
people.
It's
Yeah.
a new day.
Right.
Your Honor, I noticed on your website that you speak on a wide variety of issues, including women empowerment, youth development, family crisis and connections, everyday spirituality, goals and building a dream career, and how to overcome grief. I noticed that, in your book, there was a foreword written by, I believe it was Judge Clark. And she wrote something that just really struck me because, Attorney McCoy has lost people during the pandemic. I have too. But
Right.
Judge Clark said that, at one point she thought that, you took a hiatus when you lost your sister Leona. And then she said, I didn't know if Judge Leonia was going to come back to the court, but you did. You overcame your grief because you had such an intense, strong bond with your sister. How did you do it? What did you do? What can you give us some
Yeah, I can only
insight on
I can
that?
only imagine because I have a sister. She and I are a year and 11 months apart, and we weren't twins, but my mom dressed us as twins. We would, and we're very close. And so I can only imagine if I mean, we take trips together and we're bonded. I'm like, I can't even imagine if her not being around.
Right. Well, and that's why she said, I didn't think you were going to make it. And I was in such a cloud, and because how she died so fast and so quickly with no signs of anything being wrong. And we had just talked to students that afternoon at a graduation. We were their commencement speakers. And she had made a point to say, wear the robes. These kids never been in contact with judges. They have to be able to see when they look at us, they have to be able to see they can be anything they want to be. She said they have to know, because we would be walking through a store, we'd see a lady with her kids, and she'd say, I know who you are. And they'd shake our hands and they said, I want you to shake my son's hand. Honey, shake her hand. She's a judge. She's a real judge. And so the little boy would look at you and he's amazed. And he said, hi. I said, hi. And the fear of a judge is gone in that little kid's eyes because he sees you're friendly. So that's why she was saying what she was saying. And I said, it's going to be 85 degrees, blah, blah, blah. And now inside is 90. And Leona said, nope, this is what we got to do. The whole regalia, the drape in the back, the hat, the whole thing. And so I said, fine, Leona. And we went, and then as soon as we walked out there and in those robes, those kids were oohing and ahhing, and they were, mesmerized. And Leona said, I told you. And so she was correct. Little folks got to see themselves in the people who go before them. I did it when I looked at different folks. When I saw lawyers who I respected up there, and I said, I can do that. So I understood what that was, but then when we came back and she lived 3 houses down from me, and it was movie night because she would rent these movies, and once a night in the month we would alternate houses, and it was my time to go down there. Well, even after all of that, taking pictures with tons and tons of kids and parents, she exercised. She walked 5 miles a day. Doesn't matter what, she's gonna get that 5 miles in. Me, I walk a mile. That's it for me. But her, no. And so she had her outfit on and all of that. She kept calling me, and I went down there. And then I said, she was chattering and chattering. And then my cousin came and they were chattering. And I started the movie 3 times. And I said, look, I said, I'm not going to start this anymore if y'all don't be quiet. So she said, I'm going to be quiet, Leah. And so I was sitting on the love seat with her, and I turned it on and we watched it. We weren't even 2 minutes into the movie, and she kicked me. And I looked at her, she kicked me hard. And I said, why you kick me? And she looked at me, and her eyes were half masked. She was gone. So when you see someone who was there present, right there with you, you've never had any health problems, all of a sudden just disappear. I wondered, where did she go? Where did she go? That was a strange thing to think. I understand that. But where did you go?
No, it's not strange.
I mean, my mother was suffering in the hospital for a long period of time. She was sick a lot. So when she passed, I understood that. But we're laughing in there, she just dies and then she's gone. So when I went with, going to the hospital and all of that, when I'm there riding in the ambulance, I'm watching this big compression machine hitting her and hitting her and hitting her. And I'm looking at them. I said, is she okay? And no one will answer me. No one will answer me. And when I wrote this, I wanted people to feel what I felt. I wanted you to understand what I was thinking, because I know people have gone through this or something similar to it. And when I got there, I paced the floors. I watched them take her in, close that door on me, and I just paced and paced. And when he came out, the doctor said, I'm sorry. And I just was like, I heard that when my mother died, but this was not real to me. This was not
and
real.
had you lost both of your parents at that point in time?
My mother had passed about 2.5 years before Leonia. My father passed about 2.5 years after Leonia. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my entire family at that point. And I
gotta be, I can only imagine. I mean, I remember I was there with my grandmother when she passed. And we were supposed to, I'm the vice president of Black Women Lawyers in Michigan. We were supposed to have our cocktail sip, and then the whole family was trying to figure out who's going to be there with her. And then I said, okay, well, you can always go a cocktail sip. I can't always be there with grandma. And so I was there, and we were with her all night. And when she passed, it was 4 a.m. in the morning, and it was about 3 years ago. And that was just so, it was intense. And then what the scripture that comes to mind as we're talking about this is, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And right. But again, I mean, I can only imagine you're there with your sister. She's there 1 minute and gone the next. That's intense.
That was extremely difficult. In fact, when and I was truly lost. I remember coming home that night, and of course I was just constantly crying. I just couldn't understand what had just happened. Call. I made one call, then calls went out. Then the chief judge was calling. She had heard from somebody, and I don't know who contacted with Channel 7, I think it was. And by 11 o'clock, Leonia's picture was on the news. Okay. And I'm looking at that like, this isn't real. This is not happening. And but it was happening. And I was like totally lost. And like you said, the closeness we had, the monikers we had, Twins for Justice, Lloyd and Lloyd. I mean, and even as teachers, when her school at Redford found out that this teacher, me, over here at Cass, and we were twins, and the students didn't know we were twins until my sister came. She helped me co-direct plays, and when she walked in, during the daytime when the play was getting ready to go on for the first time, and she walked in my classroom, pandemonium hit. She, and that day my sister wore a very sharp trimmed mink hat cocked to the side, and a pantsuit, right? So she walks in and it's two of them. So, we were really, really close. And even in law school, et cetera, and, going into our own law firm.
I want to ask you about the law firm, Judge Lloyd, because it always fascinated me, and I've always admired you and Leonia for practicing entertainment law in Detroit. And I always thought that Detroit should be like a big mecca, for music. I mean, we were with Motown, it's
Yeah,
still,
Motown.
it
We're the
just
city
kind
of
of trailed off.
Motown, the origins.
Right, and the talent,
Right.
talent is still here. I mean, it's
How
still
did you get your clients, for this successful entertainment law firm that you had,
it
Lloyd and
started,
Lloyd?
it started with us having a client, Mojo, who was a DJ,
Oh,
and
okay.
because Mojo had the freedom
I've
to
heard of
play
him.
he had the freedom to play what he wanted. He had numbers that were out of this world. Like right now, when you look on TV, Judge Judy had numbers that no other TV judge could touch. They were so far apart, something like 46 for her. They got like 5. Okay, that was him. That was him.
Wow.
He'd have 22, and other DJs would have 2 and 3, which would be the norm for folks. Okay, what he
Okay.
had was out in the outer layer of the universe. Okay, so and they had a way of tracking all of this, and so he came. Leonia was at the law firm of Bell and Hudson as a clerk, and so he had a law case that came up. She was pinpointed to be the person on that case, even as a clerk, and it was just a simple thing of funds that had to be reimbursed back to folks for a boat ride that never happened on Pablo because it took off and left the people, and they were waiting for him, but he always had the boat rides. He was always late, and they already knew this, but for some reason they panicked and they took off. Well, Leonia then said, "Hey, right now your fans ain't liking you too much," and she said, "So you got to come tomorrow. I want a press conference." She said, "This picture they had of you in the paper, we're going to change all that." She said, "You have the money. We're going to have stations where they're going to be picking them up, but you are going to be able to exonerate yourself in the press. They were crucifying you in the press, and we're going to switch it around." And here's a little law clerk, Leonia, okay, masterminding this, right? Bell Hudson let her do what she wanted to do. And they were saying, "Why's the press coming in here? Why are these cameras coming in here?" They said, "Leona's doing this.
Wow.
Leona's doing this." But that's the way both of us have always been. We have creative ideas, whatever it is that we're in, okay? We're gonna go with the creativity part. It's
You were
easier to
just
get
naturals. You were just naturals with publicity, PR, entertainment law, and Mojo. He's still around, isn't he?
right. He stays still around. I talk to him from time to time. He calls me sister, and he checks on me, and that's why
Nice.
his story's in the book. And I sent him a book. I wanted him to see it, but because he changed things, not just for the radio airwaves, but for me and my sister, because everybody knew if you could get your tapes or your records to him, if he liked it, he might play it. You may have a chance to get broke right there on the air. But if this DJ likes you, he's the only one that can do that. No one has that freedom but him. Okay. So he would play different artists like that. And when we negotiated his contract, he came back to us because he said, "I want you all to represent me," particularly because of Leonia, right? And we were just starting our firm, but we hadn't even kicked the office out. But here we go. We got regular jobs, right? We got the regular legal jobs, but we're in the process of doing stuff. And then we said, "Fine, we'll do it." And he said, "This is what they sent me, a perfumed letter with the terms on it." And Leonia and I started, right? And we just went to town. We went to Carl Bolden at that time, was our mentor. And he said, well, we sat down with him. He says, "You got to have this, 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 and this." And we said, "Okay." And we got to town and we went to writing and we went to writing. And we showed him the draft. He says, "Wow, this is pretty good. We said, really? And so, and then we said, this is your contract. This is what we're going to send over. You know, by this time now, lawyers were contacting us. And so Leona and I, now we did this in our kitchen. We did this in our kitchen. Okay, we got a little memory writer. We're just pecking away. She's going to Kinko's. We don't have a secretary. We don't have a secretary. How's that? But as I say in the book to people, you can't let stuff stop your dream.
Okay.
You have a dream, you've got to go for it. You've got to do whatever it takes. Okay. And for us, these two girls were sitting there pecking away at I didn't say we had a typing table. I said at the kitchen table. Okay.
Right.
And then the owner would go out the next morning to Kinko's and she would get or Speedy, whichever one was at that time, and she would get copies. She then dispersed them, you know, to those lawyers, and they're 4 Ivy League lawyers. And then our client would say, you know, I got to thinking about, and he was smart as a whip. Mojo was smart with kind of digest them. And he said, I think I want this as well. And this, if I've got to, you know, give myself away, I might as well get the most for my money. So here was lawyers like, why didn't you tell us this before? Okay, now we got to redraft stuff. Remember now, computers are not in.
Right.
So we're redrafting and we're retyping, et cetera. Leona's got to go to the meeting. I can't get off my job at Recorder's Court, okay? I'm a judicial law assistant. That's what I am at that time.
Okay.
So Leona had more freedom. She was with the defender's office and she could go. Okay, so Leona would go over there, and I describe her looking like a young Sheila E. She came in there, three-piece pantsuit, walked in and looked at all of the 4 white guys who were sitting there, and they were, you know, Ivy League schools. And they said, well, we thought that we'd have a lunch, and then we could talk about the contract during lunch. Translation to Leona and I was, you ain't taking this serious. And Leona said, okay, that's fine. But we won't be talking about that contract. There were a couple of other things our client wanted. So we have amended the contract. Here are the new drafts. And so Leona then passes out the new draft.
Y'all like,
Yep. And then they see 4 more pages, right? And so then they said, oh, my. Maybe we should just eat first, and then we should go to the contract after we eat. Leona said, I think that's a better idea. And they saw every time she came for a meeting, they had already been through the contract. They had already in their minds had settled, okay, well, we can go along with this. Leona would always come in with more changes. And this happened at least 3 more times. Okay. And they were getting frustrated with us. And Leona said, I am really sorry to give you another draft. She said, but when you have a client who's an artist, who is so creative, these things come to him. And one of the things was to make sure he was paid, his estate was paid, even if he was gone, even if he died.
That's good.
Okay, even if he died. Right. That's good. And they looked at that like, are you crazy? And so, and
that
then,
was really ahead. She was really,
we need that.
Really ahead of your time on that. And I'm curious, did you ever think about relocating out to California to Hollywood?
Or New York?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was at a function, and this one guy who's a big wheeler dealer in California said, you and your sister need to come to California. We need lawyers like you. You lawyers, you two, you're not on drugs. You don't drink hardly nothing. He said, we need you. I don't need somebody passing me joints talking about I want to represent you. He said, I don't need them. He said, I've been watching you. He said, you two are very serious about what you do. But Leona and I loved here. Okay, we loved here. Even later on, when we were approached about being judges on TV, and we were flown out there to California. One of the first things Leona said is, if we even accept anything, she said, it has to be done, recorded on weekends. We cannot let it interfere with our real job over here. And when she went to run for re-election, some kind of way word got out that Hollywood was knocking on the door, and Leona got asked that question. Okay, and I believe it was about the 14th district, and Leona said what I just told you. She said, because our commitment is to the people here. Wow. And she said, so it would have to be around the hours we say. and within the scheduled vacations we have. And they can film a lot of shows in one day, each day, and then have it in the can and ready. She said, if we choose to do anything like that. And so they were satisfied with that. But that was a commitment that we had said, okay?
And so basically, what you turned down a judge show?
Well, she died. Leona died in between. See, the negotiations, they take a while, and sometimes Disney, for example, said we flew down there, or they flew us down there, and they wanted us. Well, this lady who had found us from Australia, she was, she had a partner, and my mother was in the hospital. They were calling the court because that's the only way they could find, us. And I told my secretary, my mother's in the hospital. I don't want to talk to anybody from California right now. I don't care. I don't care about TV show. And so she told them, she said, Florence was so diplomatic. She said, she made it very nice to them. And they said, well, when should we call back? She said, try in the beginning of the year. And so they said, oh, okay, through the holidays and everything. She said, yes. And my mother died on Thanksgiving Day,
Oh.
And so we did not want to talk to them until January. You wait till we come back. And so when we came back, because our heart wasn't in it. And we listened, and the lady told us how she found us, how she searched and all of this. And we listened, we said, And you got to understand something, that as twins, when you grow up twins, you have a light on you all the time. People look at you all the time. Because it's two of you, okay? It's two of you. And like Robyn said, they dressed alike. I'm sure people looked at them. But we were used to that. It just came with the territory. We didn't know how to be anything different. That's all we knew. So it wasn't a big deal to us, okay? Then they came here, they filmed us, and that's when she sent it out to Disney, and she's from LA, and so that was going on. But after Leona passed, I told Florence, I said, okay, I know that lady came to the funeral, and she was heartbroken, but she was just kind of out of her mind about, I don't just have, I said, yeah, I know. And she didn't talk to me about the show because I didn't want to hear about the show. And for 5 years, I told Florence, I don't want to take any calls about any show at all, none. And she said, I'll handle it, Judge. And I said, fine. It wasn't until about maybe the 6th year, and I got a call because Leona and I had been on Montel Williams' show. And we had done that show together, and then we did it separately. Okay, and
was
Montel,
that Twins for Justice thing? What was the topic on Montel's show?
The first time it was twins that are in the same business, doing things, working together. So they had a bunch of twins. They had a bunch of twins. We're the only legal ones. We're the judges. And when they said, "Can you wear something alike?" and I said, "We don't have anything alike." And so those days were gone, right? And Leona, I said, look, I'm not going to buy something for this show. I'm just not going to do it. And then my sister remembered, she said, wait a minute, we do have something alike. I said, what? What do we have? What do we have? And so she said, we have red suits. I said, what red suit? And she said, you bought the red suit first. And when it went on sale a year later, I got the suit. And I remember she did go get she loved that suit, right? But we never really ever exchanged clothes. My mother taught us, you have yours and you have yours. This thing about swapping clothes and all that, we never did that. I think my sister asked me one time to wear a sparkling jacket that I had. And I had been to a holiday party and I had worn it. It was silver and gray, sequins and stuff. And I said, sure, you can wear it. So she went to a holiday party after that. She came and got my little jacket. And this guy who tried to talk to me went to her and said, oh, you're not going to say hi now? And Leona looked at him. She said, I don't know you. And so he said, you don't know me? And Leona said, no. And so he said, I was talking to you the other night. In fact, you had on the same jacket.
Wow.
I said, that was my sister. He said, so you trying to tell me you got a twin or something? And my sister said, I do. And so he said, oh my God. So she came back from the party. She said, I ain't never wearing anything you have worn ever again. She said, could you get me in trouble? So, but we found the red suits and we put them on. I do have a picture of that. I think I included it in the book. And it was a fun show, and they liked our fire. Okay. And they even had our secretary, they piped her in, and she talked about what we call Judge 1 and Judge 2. And he said, I understand that you wanted your sister to swear you, and Leona said, I wouldn't let anybody swear me in but her. She said, this is a person I would die for. She said, and then everybody was like, and I said, yep, me. So yeah, it was a lot, and like I said, it wasn't until about 6 years later, I went and did a sizzle reel for Fox in LA, and it was the lady that used to be a producer on Montel Williams show. She told them about me. She said, there's a set of twins, but one passed, but they're both fiery and they're both this and they're both that. And so they I'm in the middle of doing stuff for drug court. I fly down to Texas. I film one day. I said, you got to put me back at the conference. I said, I can only miss one day. I said, and I got to be back at the conference. I told them what day I could go. Everything else was too important at the conference. And so they said, fine. And before I could leave, they were calling me saying, okay, they want you in LA. And then I said, all right. And they said, but you don't sound happy. I'm at the table with all of my drug court folks. I said, if I'm sitting up there ecstatic about something, they're going to say, well, what is it, Judge? And then what? We had just won an award that year as the second best drug court in the country.
Oh,
and
awesome.
so I was treating everybody. I was treating the whole team. I said to lunch with the Needle in Seattle. And I said, no, I'm happy. Mm-hmm. I said, mm-hmm. And that was it. And but so I know what all that is about. Okay. But the thing is that you still have to be who you are and what you're doing. And I knew if you are giving everything you have to what you want, and that's what helped me get through grief, is when I asked God, I said, what is it that you want me to do now? I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know what my plan. I mean,
so you asked for a sign from God?
Yes.
And you were answered.
Yes, because I felt he was going to answer. And the reason I'll say this, and just know I'm not crazy. But that night my sister died. I was so out of it, so just lost. And Leona and I had seen a program on one of those Sunday shows that come on early in the morning church stuff. And it was about a lady and a husband and wife who had lost their son. He got hit by a car and it broke her heart. That was her son. And she only had one boy. And so he wanted to move from that house because his wife couldn't get over the grief. And he felt if he moved her away, she could, start going on with her life. And she didn't want to leave. She said, because my son knows where I'm at. He knows this house, And he said, well, dear, he'll know where you are no matter where you go. And he had to work on her to get her to understand that. So she finally said, okay, but she was very hesitant. They packed up everything in their house, including the boy's stuff. They hadn't gotten rid of his stuff, and they moved to another house. And she said to her husband, I hope he knows where I am. And the husband knew that pain was still with her. They went to church, they came back, and on the mantle was a baseball. And she said, did you take that out of the boxes and put that up there? And she said, because I'll call him Bobby. I don't know what the name was. And so he said, I didn't unpack anything. And so she said, but that's his ball. And he looked at it, he said, I know. And she said, he knows we're here.
Wow.
And so, and so Leona and I said, wow. And that never left us, right? Yeah. When my mother passed, I never saw a sign. I never saw any signs from her that I'm okay or nothing. I looked for them and I didn't see anything. And when Leona died, that night I was in my room, people were ringing the doorbell constantly, and I wasn't coming out that much. I was still letting this sink in, she's not here. And where did she go? I'm going through that. And so my cousin came in the room, and as she was talking to me, she's just checking on me. And I said, my sister had this black lacquer, they have cork-like carvings inside of it. It's 3-dimensional.
Oh, wow.
And she bought one for me. She bought one for her. We were in LA. And so she teased me because mine had dust on it all the time. And it was sitting on a black dresser in my bedroom. And I said, well, you have yours in your family room where everybody's at. That's why you dust yours off all the time. I don't have to dust mine off. I'm the only one back here. And so she would laugh because it was just full of dust.
Mhm.
But to move it, you got to move that thing. It's big. Your hands have to be on the lacquer, and your fingerprints are going to be on it and it was all dusty. So I asked my cousin, I said, did you move that? Because it always faced me. And now it's facing a window, not facing me at all. And so she said, I didn't touch it. And I said, well, I didn't move it. And then I got up off the bed. I walked to me and her, looked at it. We saw the dust. We saw no fingerprints. No
Wow.
fingerprints.
Now that is
So when
uncanny.
I turned it around, and when I turned it around, of course, I had dust on my fingers. I said, now I have dust on my fingers, and where I moved, did you see my finger? I said, there were no fingerprints on it. And my cousin knew it was always facing me. She was at our house. She lived down at my sister's house, so she was always here. And she looked at me and she said, that was Leona.
Wow.
She's letting you know she's okay. And
Mm.
so, I know that, and that's why the chapter that I wrote, that I said a bond that death could not break.
Oh, yes.
And
that's
Right.
I talk about a couple of instances that 10 years later, when I'm at the conference, at the drug court conference in Washington, and you're sitting, I'm on the board, and you're sitting there with all these people that you don't know. But everybody has name tags so that you know who's the people that work for the drug court, and who's actually, just clerical and stuff like that. So the chance to meet the judges and the board, so, I was sitting next to a judge out of Maryland, and this girl looked at me and said, Judge Lloyd, and I said, yes. And I was buttering a roll, and she said, I don't mean to disturb you. She said, but I have to say something to you. And I said, yes. She said, do you have a twin sister? I said, well, I had a twin sister. Yes. She said, yeah, I know. So I kind of looked at her like, well, if she knows that, why she asked me that? So then I'm
Wow.
still buttering my bread. She said, excuse me, Judge Lloyd. I said, yes. And then she said, I have to say this. She won't leave me alone. And she said, and I'm looking at her like, I don't even know who she's talking about. And so she said, she wanted me to tell you hello. And I said, I looked at her,
Wow.
and she said, I'm sorry. And I said, I put the buttering knife down. Tears are flowing off. Everybody's looking at me at the table. The lady beside me, she said, Judge, you all right? I cannot talk. I can't talk. I said, and she said, I'm
Mm.
sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. And I said, I can't talk. I can't tell her that. It took a while before I could talk. And I said, I haven't seen a sign from her since the night she passed. I said, until you said this. I said, and I said, and that's why I choked up. And I just didn't know what to say. And there were
And so this person was some sort of like a natural medium,
Like
or
a medium,
or
like that.
She
That
was-
makes me think of the movie. I own it actually, because I'm into supernatural. That's is Tracy, but the Hereafter with Matt Damon, where he is a medium and he's kind of trying to fight that, but he's able to see people on the other side. And yeah, that makes me think of that.
I didn't see that one, but I saw Sixth Sense, and that one with Demi Moore and the late Patrick Swayze.
Right.
It was called Ghost. Frankly,
I'd never
Wow.
experienced anything like that, but she was an Indian. And she was an Indian, and she was the liaison between her tribal courts and the National Drug Court Association. So they understand all the spirits that lead.
She might have been a shaman,
Right.
That's fascinating, Judge Lloyd. Well, Judge Lloyd, we have a few minutes left, and I do want to get to how people can get your audiobook. And well, it's actually a book. That was my question. It's Freudian. Does your book come in an audiobook
I
format?
started
Because
I started it. I stopped it because of the
Okay.
pandemic, because we were recording it here at my house. I have like a thing in my basement that is soundproof and all this, and then we were set up. But then
Nice.
where the guy that was doing it, a person got COVID at his place, and then they had all stopped and shut down and get tested, and then I
Wow.
pulled back. See, that's what I'm talking about, what we talked about earlier. You pull back into your bubble. And even though he came with PPE and all that stuff and whatnot, I said, I tell you what, now, this doesn't have to be on a tight timeline like a book, when you're writing it, trying to get it out in your mind. I said, we're going to come back to this a little bit later. So, because I recorded some of it already. In fact, I recorded my entertainment lawyer. He said he wanted me to have an actress do the audio, right? And I said, no, I want to do it. And
It's better when you have, I have audiobook. I find it to be better when you have the actual person. And I know we're pressed for time too. I want to know what's next. Like, is there going to be a show? Are you going to be like, take it further than Judge Judy? That's what I want to know.
I'm like this. Hey, I'm like this. I'm like this. I always ask God to show me. My sister said this, her steps were ordered. She always said that her steps were ordered. When she had a high, when she didn't have blood pressure problems, but she had a high heart rate, and nobody understood why her heart was beating 125 beats a minute. One doctor told her, stop exercising, retire from your job. She said, I just became a judge. I'm not going to stop that. And that was like 6, 7, 8 years later when she died, right? But the thing is that, you don't know when something like that is going to happen. And you get kind of sad when you think about stuff like that. I do. But it's just one of the things that keeps me going, is that I'm letting the world know who she is. I'm letting the world know the things that she's done. And all the students, for example, I get contacted today, people that she taught. And they say, this is what she did for me. This is what she did for me. And I'm like, wow, okay. And one girl said, I'm coming. I live in California, but when you do your book signing, I'm coming. And I said, and I was gonna do one, but the pandemic happened. And Wayne State had already told me that they would let me do it at the law school. And
that's fantastic.
We want to know, so we can come too.
Yeah,
I'm gonna definitely keep you posted, so that you see. But like I said, I always say my path is going to be ordered by him. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know. My lawyer wants it to be this book to go into a movie or some kind of
I can see that
entity on
for sure.
And I'm just, I just wait, because I get phone calls. And even when I was at the court, I would get phone calls. And so sometimes I'd fly out to California, I'd do another sizzle reel. This one is done for a different company. and the thing is that it was, I don't know when something strikes like that, but it has to feel right. And it has to be something that I believe in. It has to be me. And I had one company that, they designed a program around me because of how I was and how I answered things in another sizzle reel that didn't take off. And they said, but everybody likes her. It was like something like The Talk, except at a table, everybody was sitting in these high chairs, and all these people were very notable. And a lot of them had shows already. Not me. I didn't have a show. But I said who I was. I mean, I'd been on that bench for almost 20 years at that point. And I'm going to say what I feel, and I said what I know to be right. And
Right.
they looked at me and they typed our answers out ahead of time. So they knew what you were supposed to say. When they were flipping like, do you have that? Did she saying stuff about a wedding ring? And
Off
they
script,
said,
off
they said,
script.
they said, no, they said,
Organic. It's organic.
right. It was,
Mhm.
you know, how I, you know, well, the way I was on the bench, it's just like, I'm going to tell you what I feel. You know, yeah, you get your wedding ring back. We didn't get married, but not without some pain from me. Okay. You're going to get that first. And then
Nice.
then you get your ring. And they were like, where did she say that at? Where did she say? No, it wasn't there. It wasn't there. This
And it was
came out
better
of
than the script, better.
it's better. And they said, but they had written down what I had told them on the phone.
Wow.
And they always asked everybody, do you want to see what you said when you first got asked this question? Everybody said yes. And I said, no, I don't need to see what I said. And then they said, okay, let's go. And so then they would go, and they never knew where I was going to go. And they said, everybody that, when it went to focus groups, they said, we don't really like the show, we like her. And they created a show around me. Okay. And they asked
Well,
me
we like
what I
you
said.
too, Judge Lloyd. And
I
you know, you gotta
know.
come back because when this
Yes.
pandemic clears, we want to find out more about the book signings and everything. And there's just, I feel like we only got halfway through the book. So I hope that you can join us again in the
Okay.
near future. And thank you so much. You're so gracious for giving us some of your time this Saturday, and bless you. We
Yeah,
really
thank
appreciate
you. And there
everything
are
that you
children
do.
out there, as we talked with their children that are suffering, and there are children that need inspiration. They need to hear from you. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
for me, I help, my father and I have a firm in Ann Arbor, and part of what brought me into Detroit is because I was seeing more Black attorneys and Black judges, people who look like me. And that makes a difference for a young person to see that. People say, well, maybe you want to be a judge or run for Congress or here, but you got to see yourself in order to even have that be a reality. So we
Exactly.
applaud you. And
Exactly.
yeah, thank you. And
And
yeah,
show us
we'd
your
love to have
mug.
you back.
I'd
Show us
be,
the mug one more time.
okay.
This
This is the book.
Oh,
Okay.
beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Your Honor,
This
Your
is the
Honor.
book, Your Honor, Your Honor. And it can go on my website, JudgeLeonia.com, JudgeLeonia.com, LEONIA.com. And when you go on there, you're going to see trailers. You're going to see a whole lot of stuff, including the site that goes directly to Amazon. But this book is for people who think that they're at their wits' end, that they can't go any further, that they want to give up. Read my book. You will not
Wonderful.
give up. This will charge you back up. And you are right. They got to see somebody, but they'll see a reflection of what they can do with their lives. Whatever that is that they want to do, they cannot give up. That's the key. You can't give. I don't care if the floor falls from underneath you. You can't stop. You have to keep going.
Well,
And
thank
on
you,
that
Black
word,
woman.
thank
We're
you,
hearing
Your
some
Honor.
Black woman wisdom. Thank you. And you have a blessed day.
You too.
We'll see you
You too.
soon, Your Honor. Take care and
Yeah,
stay
see you
safe.
later.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay.
So we've got Jeff Irwin, who is joining us next. Let's see. Okay.
Okay, girls. I'm gone.
All righty. Thank you.
Okay. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I did too. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much.
I have to talk
And
to
I
my
hope I
sister.
answered enough questions for you, did I?
You did.
Oh yes,
Excellent.
it was good. Yeah, I'm a book reader, so I'm about to jump into that book. I'm like, I want to hear the audio book too. I like to read the book and the audio book. Like
I'm gonna do the audio, because what I didn't finish telling you all was that to convince my lawyer, I went into the studio and I had it done. I did I don't know how many pages, and I said he has to hear me do this. So I did it and I sent it to him. He sent it out to all my beta readers, the people who were being beta readers for my book, and they said, "This is what she sounds like. This is her. Oh, this is great." And so he said, popular opinion says it's you. I said, okay.
Great.
Bye
Thanks,
bye, you too.
Judge. Okay, we'll see you soon.
yeah,
Okay.
see you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So
Okay.
yeah, you would just push leave to
Leave.
leave. Yeah.
The red button. The red button.
All righty. So Hello, everybody. Again, this is Attorney Robyn McCoy, and this is Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracy. And we have this is our second hour. We have our second
Senator
honored
Jeff's
guest.
in the house.
Yes, State Senator Jeff Irwin. And did you bring a mug? We try to have a mug sometimes. I have a mug that says all things are possible to those who believe, Mark 9:23, and I have my green tea.
Nice. Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to see you, Robyn. It's great to see you, Tracy. I would have loved to have heard more from the judge. It sounds like you had an interesting hour before I got on, but it's a busy day of Zoom calls, and I am here with my, this mug is not very interesting. It's just a steel mug, but it's filled with the cold brew that I regularly have sitting on my kitchen counter as I am steadily and constantly always brewing more of it, because I do like to stick with the cold brew all winter, even though sometimes it feels insane because it's just so delicious.
Sounds yummy. Sounds yummy. And thanks for stopping out to join us because it's the Dems Spring State Convention this weekend, right?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna let
absolutely.
Tracy. I'll let Tracy get started. I gotta run and do something real quick. I'll come back. But Tracy, go ahead and get started with Jeff.
Yes, so thanks for joining us for our second hour. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'm TM Martin, aka Tracy Martin, and we are just so pleased to join us today, Senator Jeff Irwin. And you're out of District 18, is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
District 18. And so today we're going to be talking about something massive that has happened in Michigan in terms of criminal justice reform. You know, one time Michigan was rather challenged, and now Michigan is a leader when it comes to expungements, but something really monumental happened in January of this year, where Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed off on a number of bill packages that turn into the Juvenile Clean Slate law. And we're here today to talk with Senator Jeff about these different bills that have turned into law, what they mean, how they will impact youth in Michigan and their families. And so first, I want to congratulate you on all of your hard work, Senator Jeff. I know that there was this one bill in particular, SB 1047, about the summonses that are used for failures to appear. And tell us more about that exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm be happy to tell you about a lot of exciting things that happened in the last 2 years, but let me just start by thanking you both for providing this forum and being interested in these important issues. And I see the beautiful Capitol behind you there, Tracy. And,
Yes.
you know, I have the opportunity to work in that beautiful building, several days a week. And I only have that opportunity because the people in Washtenaw County have sent me there to do that job. And so it's a tremendous honor and pleasure. And I like to always recognize the people who I'm serving there, people of, Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor, Saline, Milan, Salem Township, York Township, Augusta Township, Pittsfield Township. These are all the folks I work for. So when you say District 18, I want to thank folks for giving me the opportunity to work in that beautiful building on these important issues. And so, last year, just at the kind of top line level, before we get into any details, the last 2 years, I should say, the last cycle, the 100th session of the Michigan legislature was dysfunctional in many ways. I mean, we couldn't come together on budgets. The Republicans were really grappling with this idea that now they have a Democratic governor and she has power, and they're struggling to understand that. But the one thing that went really well, despite all that other dysfunctionality, was criminal justice reform. We had an incredibly productive session on criminal justice reform. And while I usually take every opportunity to point out to the public how much better Democrats are in Lansing than Republicans on education and clean water and all sorts of issues. My Republican colleagues did a great job last year, and we really came together, and we didn't agree on everything, but we found the things we could agree on, and we did them. And that was a different flavor. And we had some good bipartisan action on raise the age, on expungement, clean slate for adults, a clean slate for kids, which was legislation that I introduced. And we had a lot of good discussions about those issues, and that didn't just have good discussions, we got something done. And then finally, the other big piece that you asked specifically about was that there was a big package of bills that came out of a group called the Jail and Pretrial Task Force. This was created by the governor, the legislature, and the Supreme Court to sort of put together a team of stakeholders in the criminal justice system to try to figure out what could we do around the concerns we have around jail and pretrial issues. And that's where that bill, Senate Bill 1047 came out of, which was really did two things. So my legislation in that package did two important things. One, the thing that did that I think most people pay attention to, because it was kind of the main thing, was that it changed how courts are supposed to deal with failures to appear for the first time failure to appear. When we looked at the data statewide on jail stays, we found out something that I already actually knew because I had served as a county commissioner for many years. What we found out was that most of the people in jail are not there for very long. Most of the people are there for very, very short stays, oftentimes less than a day. And a lot of times people get lodged in jail and they're there for a few hours, or they spend a night in jail, but they get out pretty quickly because they haven't been convicted yet. They're awaiting trial. Right. And the biggest cohort of these folks that end up having to go to jail are folks who are there because they got some sort of traffic or parking tickets or some sort of combination of things that ended up resulting in a bench warrant because they didn't appear to their court hearing that they were supposed to appear to. And then at some time later in the future, some officer ran into them. They had some sort of interaction with law enforcement. Oops, now there's a warrant and now we got to bring you in. This wasn't someone who was dangerous. This wasn't someone who was really trying to abscond from the community. And, a lot of times this was someone who just wasn't engaging appropriately with the court. And so what my legislation said,
I see that. Yeah, I would say I see that all the time. I do criminal defense and juvenile work, and Tracy I know does juvenile work as well. But yeah, I see it all the time. Or child support. We see folks that, or maybe they change the address and the court doesn't know, and life gets really busy. But yeah, I see that all the time. It's
usually a communication issue.
Right.
Like you said, address change or some sort of communication issue, especially during this pandemic.
Right.
Communication's been really challenged.
Well, here's what we do to try to fix it. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Tracy. I'm sorry.
I find the bill to be, this new law to be really timely. So this SB 1047, it now allows defendants to resolve low-level warrants without being arrested, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the first thing it does is it says that for the judges, it gives them more discretion, and it really creates a situation where the default for a first-time failure to appear is a summons, not a bench warrant, right? And what we're trying to nudge the court system to do is to do a better job of communicating, right? I mean, think about everything else we engage with as consumers. How many other entities do you have to sort of like wait for some letter in the mail? Why aren't the courts using texting? Why aren't the courts using email? Why don't we just, engage the courts in communicating to the public in a way that's going to be most successful and focus on having success rather than using the jail as just a catch-all for everybody who falls through the cracks or misses the communication. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So we came together as a legislature and said, we're locking up too many people who don't need to be there. Let's take these first-time failures to appear and do a couple things. One, say the default is a summons. If the judge wants to deviate on the record and say, I think this person's dangerous, well then, okay, that's a different situation. But the default should be a summons. Two, it allows people a grace period to come in and get those issues taken care of, just like you said, Tracy. They can come into court, they can take care of their tickets, they can schedule their next court hearing and not be worried that by walking through the doors, they're going to get linked up and thrown in jail, right? And so what we do is we're trying to get rid of some of these things that make the system dysfunctional. Let's try to make the system easier for people to comply with before we bring the hammer down, all right? So that's the main thing. That's the main thing that the bill does. The bill actually does something else that didn't get a lot of notice in the media, but I think is important too. It just wasn't very controversial. The other thing the bill does is it deals with issues where, let's say I got a speeding ticket in Washtenaw County, never paid it, and then I get picked up in Charlevoix County or Wexford County, right? What happens now is that county will hold me.
Right.
But there's no standard in law as to how long they're supposed to hold me. And so what my bill did, and it is now law, it says that they've got 72 hours to pick that person up. If they don't, that person must be released.
And that's beautiful.
Great.
I had a client that called me the other day who was in Traverse City who has some stuff in Detroit, and it's like things are in limbo. So that's beautiful because, you know, Tracy and I know Tracy used to do criminal defense, and I can't tell you how many people that get sucked into the system, and then there's issues with poverty. And then, you know, I know, Jeff, we've invited you to come out and do an expungement forum on March 27th to talk about the clean slate legislation. But I said to Tracy, we want to have him come on sooner because she and I both have been actively working in the juvenile court. And you know, I reached out to you like the last couple of years because before I was doing expungement workshops with the lawyers and the judges, and I said, okay, no, we've got to start having regular communication with the state reps and state senators. And your office has been very good, Desmond. Shout out to Desmond, with giving me information to review and having at that dialogue, because it's like that's what we've got to do. We've got to have communication with the courts and the state reps, the state senators. And you know, and Tracy has this focus, you know, she's designated as an expert in the juvenile court. So I said, yes, we're going to have you come out on March 27th and we're going to have the dialogue. But I said, we got to get Jeff up right in center and have him talk to the public about, make sure they know about these laws and the great work that you're doing. And then as I was reading your profile too, you know, I've read it before, but you know, I applaud the work that you've done as far as making sure that we have clean water. And then I also saw that you were born in Petoskey. I have friends in Petoskey. I have a friend that is a judge up there. And so just shout out to you for all that you do.
But didn't he grow up in Sault Ste. Marie, or what's the Sault Ste. Marie connection?
Oh, I can't hear you. That's the sound.
I'm sorry, I was doing that for sound quality issues. Yeah, so I was, my family lived in Sault Ste. Marie when I was born. So my mom and dad both lived there. And, you know, my mother made the choice to have me at Petoskey General Hospital, which I think is now a McLaren facility. And so, you know, we drove down there to have me, or I guess there's no we about it. I think my dad was driving, my mom was in the passenger seat. And but we lived in the Sioux, and so they took me right back up to Sault Ste. Marie. And, you know, it's interesting because her choices at that time were to probably either go down to Petoskey or to go across the river and have me born in Sioux, Canada. And I give her a hard time all the time at family functions for not just falling across the border and having me over there, because then, of course, I would have universal health. Right. You know, and it's one of the things that Canada does better than us. And, you know, growing up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, you always look across the river and see Sioux, Canada right there. It's helpful to know how close they are and to realize that there's more than one way of doing things. And we should always be examining, you know, what it is we're doing and why, and, you know, be willing to make a change. And so, yeah, I grew up many years of my early years growing up in the Sioux and in a couple trailer parks up there, and a couple of them we moved to a house, and then we ended up moving down to the DeWitt area when I was in elementary school. But yeah, my roots are in the Sioux. That's why I'm a member of the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians, because you know, have some family history through that as well. And I ended up coming to Ann Arbor to go to the University of Michigan, and I was frankly planning on going to law school. I like to argue, I like to talk. I figured that'd be a good place for me. And as I was doing kind of the pre-law type classes in the political science department, I started getting involved in activism. I got in activism around affordable housing and homelessness. That was at the time where we hadn't built a new homeless shelter yet, and that was an important issue in the community. And I was also getting really active on environmental issues. And a seat opened up with the County Board of Commissioners when I was still an undergrad. And I sort of thought at the time, well, what do I have to lose? I'll go for it, right? And I found out later what I had to lose. It was mostly nights and weekends, and it was also law school. And, you know, so here I am, like 20 years later, still doing this. And it's been incredibly rewarding to me. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been very rewarding for me. And I've got the best constituents anywhere here in Washtenaw County. And I'm, you know, really happy to be able to raise my kids here now. And yeah, we're sort of near Packard and Platt is where I'm in my little Zoom bunker here, right around the corner of Packard and Platt now.
Yeah, I used to live on Packard when I was in law school, and then what you were talking about, the Native American connection, Tracy and I both have Native American ancestry, and I was active, like I did my my honors thesis on interrelations between the Blacks and Indians in Florida in the 19th century, and then in Belize in the 18th century. And yeah, and I was active in law school with the Native American Law Students Association. So when I was referencing my connection to Petoskey, I had my friend Judge Ali Maldonado, who is a judge on the Little Traverse Bay of Odawa Indians, and then Cammie Frazier. Shout out to Ali and Cammie. They went to law school with me. So Cammie works with the Michigan Indian Legal Services group that's in Traverse City. So yes, so you were saying that you were, yeah, I read that in the profile too. You were with the Washtenaw County Commissioner. You did a lot with water, making sure, because that's the thing about Michigan. Michigan is like fresh water. We're surrounded by fresh water. So when I hear about the whole Flint situation and contaminated water in Detroit and lead, I'm just like, what in the world? Like, how can this even happen that we have contaminated? The people should be looking to us to make sure that for the best water.
Right. Well, I want to ask Senator Jeff about something that he tweeted yesterday. And yes, I'm a lineal descendant of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians out of North Carolina. Shout out to them. And but Senator Jeff, yesterday I saw a tweet. You know, earlier when we were talking with Judge Lloyd, we talked about the impact of the pandemic, and you tweeted something about prison reform and people who are incarcerated should have vaccine priority, hygiene products for the incarcerated, and the cost to communicate via phone and email. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, and please feel free to butt in if I'm going on too long, because these are all big issues, and, you know, we could talk for a long time about any one of them, right? I mean, I could just chat both of you up about, you know, some history down in the southeast part of the country, because that's not a lot. I don't know a lot about the intersection between the Native populations and tribal communities and you know, the Black people in the South and you know, the Cherokee and the Seminoles. I don't know a lot about that, and I'm fascinated by Native history. I've spent most of my time trying to learn more about the Ojibwa and the Odawa and everything that happened here in the Great Lakes area.
That's
so we could spend a lot of time talking about that.
We should have another show about the Indian Child Welfare Act.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or the tuition waiver. We actually fully funded the tuition waiver for the first time in 20 years as a result of an amendment that I got passed. So these are all fascinating issues. But with respect to prisons here in the state of Michigan, let me just try to cover those issues as much as I can briefly. We can go deeper if you want. But the first thing I mentioned was vaccines. It's not a super popular opinion, but I'm going to keep sharing it, which is that if we've got folks who are in our custody, they're our responsibility to keep them safe. No matter what they did, no matter what we think about them, none of that matters anymore. It's sort of like a police officer. Once they put those silver bracelets on somebody, they're in their custody and they're responsible for their safety, period. Right. And that's how we need to be thinking about these prisoners. Currently, the way it's working in the prisons is that if you're over 65, so you're eligible because of your age, then you're eligible to get the vaccine. Staff, they're all eligible. But the rest of the population, which is the vast majority of the prison population, is not eligible to get their vaccine yet. You know, in the prisons, their answer to this is, well, they'll be eligible when they're eligible by age, and we're doing everything we can to keep, you know, COVID out of the facilities. But, you know, I just don't think that's a good enough answer. So I continue to ask the question. I asked it in oversight committee this week. I've been asking it for a couple of weeks. Where are they on the vaccine priority? I mean, you know, if the department's answer to me was, well, you know, the younger prisoners aren't as high as the older prisoners, or the younger prisoners are going to have to wait until after we get done with this cohort, that would be a much better answer than what I'm getting right now, which is that they're not even specifically considered on our matrix, which I don't think is acceptable.
Yeah, that's wrong. I'll say this. Yeah, I'll say this. As a criminal defense attorney, I represent the whole gambit, the younger and the older, and I try to do as much screening as possible. So there are younger people that are asthmatic, that do have health issues, that would make, you know, that if they were to get COVID, they fall into that range of comorbidities. In the Black community, white community, Hispanic, there are people that have diabetes. And so I know the criminal defense bar has really taken that on, especially in Wayne County, to file motions for compassionate release. So I understand, yes, people who are 65 should be getting the vaccine, but folks that are younger, they do, and Black, Native American, Hispanic, white, have comorbidities.
Yeah, and so these folks are just not being they're just not being considered appropriately in my view, which is why I keep asking the question. And there's other similar settings that I think are being there's just not enough attention being paid to them, and so I continue to ask about things like adult foster care homes and residential drug treatment facilities, right. And what's happening with some of our particularly seniors, but often also disabled residents who receive in-home care. And how are we making sure that that is a safe environment? And what are we doing with the vaccination of those essential workers? So yeah, there's a lot of these. The problem with this whole vaccine distribution is that it is incredibly complicated. And people are in a variety of circumstances that need to be respected and examined iteratively, because it is there are specifics to all these situations. Anyway, yes, I continue to ask about prisons. The other pieces that you mentioned that I'll just try to touch on briefly are, hygiene products. I asked about that. I hear a lot of complaints from inside because I do pay attention to the messages I get from the inside and from families of folks who are inside. And I hear a lot of complaints about this. Why can't we get access to bleach-based cleaners? Why can't we get access to more hygiene products? And also specific to the women's prison, why don't we get access to more feminine hygiene products? These are all concerns that I've raised outside of COVID, particularly around the females' access to hygiene products, and I'll continue to raise them. Now, the answers we got at the hearing this week in the Oversight Committee were that, we do provide this is how much, free product we provide to our women residents. It's not enough, but I think getting the question out there and the answer out there is somewhat helpful. And then their answer around the hygiene products was that, yes, we are engaging the prisoners and we are giving them all the equipment they need. That answer doesn't really square with what I'm hearing from the folks inside, but I did notice that part of the big difference is that the Department of Corrections was originally allowing the prisoners access to bleach-based cleaners, and then they've restricted that now. It's not that they don't allow it at all, it's that they allow it a lot less, and there's complaints about that. And so we're trying to get to the bottom of that, but that was the answer I got on Tuesday, I believe it was. And then the final piece is probably the one.
Senator Jeff,
the final piece is about, yeah.
For a moment. Okay, you were talking about Huron Valley Women's Correctional Facility. It's the only, as we know, women's correctional facility in Michigan. And I know that in the past there have been outbreaks of scabies. And so how are they doing now during this pandemic? I understand there have been outbreaks. It's affected the correctional officers, the residents. I mean, I don't understand why this wouldn't be at the top of the list, in terms of, passing this legislation to get more funding to provide these products. It would keep everyone safe.
Right, and I know Rep Ronnie, we interviewed him about this, and he specifically brought up the Huron Valley Women's Correctional Facility. And then I will say this, I mean, part of when they recently made the designation for attorneys to be frontline essential workers, because there are folks that we have clients that are in prison and jail. And I can just tell y'all, before the pandemic, the conditions were just deplorable in the jail. I had a friend that worked with me as a public defender at the Legal Aid Defender's Office. She had a little kit with pine saw and spray and gloves. And that was before the pandemic. So you can only imagine now with the pandemic and just unsanitary conditions. It's like, I understand people commit wrongs, but they're in other countries, they are more humane. This is like a violation of the 8th Amendment, and it's cruel and unusual punishment to put people in these conditions that it's like you do wrong, but it shouldn't be like a death penalty, a death sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Women's Huron Valley is something that I've put a lot of focus into, partially because when I was a state rep, I got to serve on the Corrections Appropriation Subcommittee and toured that facility more than once, and talked to a lot of folks inside and looked at a lot of these conditions. And Women's Huron Valley has been traditionally for the last 10 years grossly overcrowded, and it's had huge problems with conditions. And so, one of the things that has been a result of this COVID-19 pandemic and disaster is that our prison population is way down. So the numbers at Women's Huron Valley, I think, are now at the level where I still like to see them come down a fair amount, and we could talk about commutations and pardons and other things like that we're working on. But I do think that they're in a position now to do better in that facility, because you went from 2,200 folks in there to 17 something now, which is a big difference. And so hopefully they'll do better. But anyway, the focus of the Senate Oversight Committee hearing was really an audit on their healthcare program at Huron Valley, partially because I don't want to take any credit away from the chairman who scheduled this meeting, but I had been asking him for a year now to hey, we gotta do look-see on what happened with the scabies incident. And so if you read the Auditor General's report from our hearing on, I think it was Tuesday, you can see their analysis of what happened in the scabies disaster. It was a little bit obscured, like some of the details are a little bit obscured because the state is getting sued over this. So I think that they're not being as aggressive about getting information out there as I'd like them to be. But, what happened is that the inmates had been complaining about it. They were going to healthcare, but the healthcare folks were not diagnosing it properly. Now, when a dermatologist came into the facility, I believe as a visitor, they diagnosed it immediately. What that tells me is that the healthcare contractor was purposely trying to sweep this under the rug. And there are basically two problems we're trying to solve. One, how do we set up the incentives so that the healthcare provider doesn't want to make these problems go away because it costs them money? And two, how do we get rid of some of the policies we have in place that are preventing people from putting these issues out there? So for instance, right now we have a copay requirement for any non-emergency meeting with a healthcare professional. I understand why they're doing that in the prisons, but when you're a prisoner and you only maybe earn $15, $20 a month, at your prison job, and you have to pay a $5 copay to go say like, hey, check out this rash that might turn into infection that gets the whole facility. We don't want folks to have to pay a copay for that kind of stuff. We don't want to reduce utilization on preventative care. Right, that's a foolish way to organize a healthcare copay system. And so, in the committee meeting this week, I was trying to urge them to not have these copays and to not require the collection of the copays in circumstances where they shouldn't. But of course, the legislature has passed a law requiring them to collect these copays in certain circumstances because a majority of my colleagues, don't want to be seen to be doing anything for prisoners. They want to play off the public sentiment, which is that these people have done something bad and they need to be punished. I'm not playing the game that way. You heard what I said about it. Like I agree with Attorney McCoy, who says that, we have a responsibility to these people, whether we like it or not. And we got to keep, they were sentenced to one thing and they can be punished in that way, but they're not sentenced to death. They're not sentenced to contract COVID.
And your colleagues too, when you say your colleagues are worried about certain things, I'm gonna just put it out there for there are attorneys out there, wrongful death, personal injury, things like that. If there's issues about liability, I know that there's gross negligence. I mean, there's immunity, but if you get past gross negligence, then there's already been lawsuits in Michigan against, the prisons for raping folk, women and all that, guards. And so that's just ripe for liability. So your colleagues need to be thinking about liability. If people get sick and die, Michigan is a very litigious state. There are a lot of lawyers here. We're in a pandemic. They got lawyers that have a lot of freedom. So it's like to champion these causes. So they definitely need to be cognizant. I mean, to me, you should be doing this because it's humane. But if you got to have, for those out there that don't want to think about humanity, you need to think about the fact that there are lawyers out there. Tracy and I are lawyers. We know that are circling the wagon. And if they see wrong, it could be a class action lawsuit. And the taxpayers of Michigan will have to pay at the end of the day, just like the Flint situation. So it's like it's better to be preventative. Tracy, you were going to say something.
I'm sure the state doesn't want another suit from Deb Gordon, Attorney Jeff Gordon. So Senator Jeff, were you pressing for like a moratorium on collecting these copays? And then I want to circle back and talk about raise the age.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was advocating for in committee, but I didn't make a formal proposal. It was really, the context was that we were receiving an audit from the Auditor General. The Auditor General was saying that the department wasn't doing a good job of collecting these copays in every circumstance. And I was saying, great, that's wonderful. My Republican colleagues were trying to kind of tighten the screws and shouldn't you be collecting these? And I was saying, absolutely not. Think about it. Think about what happens in this environment. Think about how this looks for a prisoner. Do we really want to be so aggressive about this? And so that's kind of the stage we were at on Tuesday. The one final thing that was on my list that I haven't talked about yet is this whole issue of like facilitating the communication between people on the inside and their friends and family on the outside. The amount of money that we charge prisoners and their families to connect over the phone or over email is unnecessary and it's unhelpful. It leads to increased recidivism and it's a big problem. And so I've been trying to fix this for a number of years. This is actually something that I learned way back when I worked for Senator Alma Wheeler-Smith, this was an issue that she always worked on, was trying to reduce the cost of phone calls for prisoners to connect to their families. And, you know, so that was something I learned for her when I worked for her. And I picked up when I got back to the legislature. It's outrageous, the amount of money we charge. Just to give you kind of like a top of the budget number, last year, I think it was, we got about $10 million from prisoners and their families for phone calls. And so, you know, that's how much we're surcharging to bring money into the prison budget to pay for prison programming. And I think that we need to make that easier for friends and family to connect. I think we should be providing them with access to, you know, telecommunications technology for free or close to free, because they need to be engaged with the outside world. They need to understand how computers work. You know, when these folks get out, which they're mostly going to be getting out, we want them to be able to be successful in the modern world, but we're taking away every important tool that they would have to be successful in the modern world.
Well, I'd like to hear some Senate hearings where Tom Gorse, who owns the Detroit Pistons, gives testimony. I know he's been called out recently by activists who've been pressing him about these outrageous education bills that families have to pay just to talk with their loved ones who are incarcerated.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's you know, I think it's important for recidivism. It's important for the humanity and respecting these people as humans and their families. It's important to their families, their children. You know, a lot of folks that are in prison have families and children. They need to be able to connect to these folks. It's important to those children. We shouldn't be punishing those kids for something their parents did. And, you know, once again, like with everything with respect to prison conditions and prisoners in general, we're not doing right by these people. We need to do better. And there are too few advocates in this space because, you know, the politics just aren't good for it, right? This isn't something the public is particularly focused on, which is one of the reasons why I try to put these messages out on social media. I try to talk about it during my coffee hours and other settings because, you know, it's important that people understand what's happening in our prisons. It's sort of like when I think on the national scale with respect to the national defense budget and what we're doing overseas. And I think it's important that every American know where we're dropping our bombs, right? Are people aware of how our power and our vote and our voice and our money is being used to kill innocent people in Yemen? Do people even know about that?
No, I'm sure they don't. So, and thank you for mentioning that. Now, what about raise the age, though? I want to pivot to that.
Yeah, definitely.
That is monumental, and I understand it's going to take effect in October of this year. Senator Jeff Irwin, could you please talk about, you know, how 17-year-olds used to be charged as adults, what happened with the legislation, and what it's going to mean now to 17-year-olds?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I had an opportunity to work on when I was a House member. We weren't able to get it done then. And because we had such a good year last year, last 2 years with the criminal justice reform, we were able to get this done. I really want to give a shout out to my colleague, Sylvia Santana, who I really felt led the charge on this issue in the Senate. She's a tremendous colleague and a friend, and you know, she was really important to getting this done. She's also really important to getting that jail and pretrial task force package done that we talked about earlier as well. But you know, she helped sponsor these bills around raise the age, and it does exactly what you just said, right? For many, many years, we've been trying to fight this battle of, you know, why is it in Michigan that we charge so many more young people as adults? And the reality is that in most states, the way it works is if you want to charge a young person as an adult, you got to go through something that I would call judicial review, meaning that, sure, the prosecutor can ask for it, but a judge, an elected judge in that community, has to look at that and say, yes, I'm going to allow you to charge this person as an adult. In Michigan, we changed this law a long time ago to say that, no, prosecutors just get sole discretion. If they want to charge anybody as an adult, they can. And I shouldn't say anybody. What we did is we created a very, very long list of offenses that were, you know, just that prosecutors could automatically waive to the adult system with no judicial review. My view is that every single juvenile that is going to be charged as an adult, no matter what, should go through judicial review. And back when we first started this raise the age effort, back when I was in the House in 2014, I believe it was, I introduced legislation to say that full on judicial review for everything, no list of offenses, just period. Every single offense should be reviewed. Right. That's not what we got in the end. What we got in the end was a dramatically diminished list of crimes that prosecutors can automatically kick to the juvenile or kick to the adult court for juveniles. And so now the way it is now after this law is passed is that the default for 17-year-olds is juvenile court, and the default for 18-year-olds is adult court. Now, if you've got a juvenile who's 17 or under who commits an offense, the prosecutor can still petition for that, but unless it was a capital offense, unless it was an offense that carries a life sentence, they got to get the judge to approve that, and that's a big change. We also changed some of the way that these sentences are financed. I'm struggling to describe this properly, but let me just kind of take a step back and say that one of the big reasons why we weren't able to do this way back in, like, say, 2016, when there was a lot of energy for this idea, was because the counties really pushed hard against it. The county's view was that, well, shoot, the way it is now, when we get a 17-year-old that did something wrong, we send them off to MDOC and they're not our problem anymore financially. But the way it works with juveniles is that when a juvenile is sentenced to anything, whether it's a residential treatment program or some other community-based program, that program is paid for 50-50 between the state and the county. Okay. And so essentially what we did is when we said all these 17-year-olds are going to be treated as juveniles, we basically said for this whole additional class of criminals that used to be going to adult court, or now they're going to be in the juvenile court, which means the counties are going to have to pay for 50% of whatever it is that they're going to be sentenced to, and that can be very expensive. And so the counties said, the state can't change this unless the state pays for it. And so what we agreed to finally in the Raise the Age package was, we're going to require you to treat 17-year-olds as a default as juveniles. So unless you've got a really good reason to bring them in adult court, you can't. And it's got to be reviewed by a judge. And the state is going to fund the costs for these 17-year-olds for a number of years. I believe it was 5, although I may be misremembering that. I think it's 5 years. And so in the budget recommendation for next year, which we're currently just received from the governor, there is an allocation in that recommendation that is the Raise the Age allocation to basically fund the county's portion of the care, the 50-50 portion of the care for those 17-year-olds that are adjudicated.
And I
so
think
it's in October 21 it takes effect.
That's when it takes effect.
And I think that's key because as Tracy and I have seen in the courts, and as we all know, the science is out there that the adult brain doesn't even fully mature to the age of 25. That's why you have HIDA, the Homes Youthful Training Act was expanded from 17 to 21 to now, it's my understanding it's up to 24 at the discretion of the prosecutor. So, and then, we've heard accounts of 16-year-olds when they see us. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix. It talks about the Central Park 5. You have children that are going to the adult courts and being raped and brutalized. And I would say this, even in the juvenile court, there is a great need for more diversionary programs. Like I know when I was working at the juvenile court at the Lincoln Hall of Justice in Detroit, they had some diversionary programs where they were more hands-on with working with the kids in the community, where they say it takes a village before they got to going to the juvenile detention facility, because some of the kids would go to the juvenile detention facility. Some of them might have been like doing petty crimes, and then they go to juvie and they become more sophisticated with their activity, and then they become even worse when they come back into the community. And the purpose of the juvenile court is to rehabilitate the children. Like I remember my professor in law school, Yale Camazar, he talked about, he was white, he was from New York. He said, when I was young, I did stuff, I made mistakes, and the police gave me warnings, and they gave me opportunity to grow out of it. But he said, for Black and brown Native American children, they're not getting the same treatment. They're not getting the opportunity to grow out of the hanging with the wrong crowd and the stupidity. They're being socialized to be caught up in the school to prison and pipeline and the prison industrial complex. So I definitely applaud you for your work that you've done. And can you talk some more about the juvenile legislation? that you proposed?
Yeah,
right?
and so I'll touch on a couple other additional topics, and we'll see where you two want to take it. But in addition to passing Raise the Age, the other thing that we did last year that was huge was we passed this Clean Slate bill. And the Clean Slate bill is providing relief for criminal record expungement for maybe 1 million people in the state of Michigan. It's huge. It gets to a whole lot of folks who had driving with license suspended, a whole lot of folks who had petty stuff around cannabis, and so that was great. But what was forgotten in that package was, what about all the juvenile justice issues? What about adjudications? This only dealt with convictions. And so what I was able to do is I was able to put together a 2-bill package together with Republican Senator, who's now the prosecutor in McCoy County, Lucido, and we put together what we called Clean Slate for Kids, which was basically the same sort of package for kids to say that if you got your adjudication, if you were held accountable for your crime as a juvenile, there's an opportunity for you to get that cleared if you get your life back on track and stay on track and don't get in any new trouble. And so I was really happy that we were able to push that through. Connected with that were some additional record confidentiality pieces that were in Senate Bill 682. Michigan previously, correct. Previously, Michigan was one of the states where your juvenile record would be out there publicly on the internet forever, for anyone to see always. And so what we've done now with Senate Bill 682 is we've made those records more confidential so that people don't have, a youthful indiscretion follow them forever, which I think is a real positive.
And Senator Jeff, could you talk a little bit about SB 1006, I think it is, which enables, it amends the Social Welfare Act so that people can get the SNAP benefits, I think?
Yeah. So, basically, previously we had passed, legislation restricting folks from being eligible for SNAP benefits when they had, certain convictions. And that was another bill that we were able to pass. I believe that was Senator Annick's bill, our Democratic leader in the Senate. And we were able to get that passed and signed, which, provides people access to food assistance, even if they've got one of these, old drug felonies on their record or something like that. It didn't make any sense that we did that in the first place. And this is another example, I think, of the bipartisan coming together around, some of these issues. Why are we refusing federal money to help feed people in our state just because we're mad at something they might have done, 5-10 years ago? It was totally senseless. And so I'm glad we got that out of the way.
I want to ask, how did this task force work? The bipartisan task force. I mean, you were able to achieve a tremendous amount to really positively impact the community. But could you shed some light on how the Democrats and Republicans were able to come together up in Lansing to make this happen? Because it's really incredible to me, right? In a good way.
Yes. I'll do my best. But let me take a step back on. There was one other issue I wanted to mention about juvenile justice that I didn't mention. I just want to make sure you both know about this, because this is something that we didn't get done, but I'm trying to get done. Okay. So, Robyn, you had mentioned a documentary, which I'm going to have to go back and watch because I'm interested in that Central Park story. I've read a lot about it, but I haven't seen that documentary yet. Yeah, but we're working on some legislation relative to school discipline. And one of the things I think that we know, or one of the things that I know, is that school discipline is not equitably applied. Right. And there are tremendous systemic, racism in our school system with respect to school discipline. So I've introduced a package of bills last fall that we're going to be reintroducing, working with the Student Advocacy Center and other groups to try to provide what I'm calling a Bill of Rights for students. Oh, excellent. And what got me thinking about this is you mentioned the documentary. After we started working on this legislation, I got an opportunity to see a documentary called Push Out, which really focuses on the disparate discipline that are faced by Black children, but particularly Black girls, and how often they are seen as being older than they really are, and school officials will often misjudge their culpability and their age and all sorts of things, and that's leading to problems. Anyway, without trying to dwell on identifying the problem as much, what we're trying to do is introduce legislation that will say it will help this problem. And so what we're trying to do is create a Bill of Rights for students who are facing school disciplinary issues. So if you're facing a long-term suspension or an expulsion, we want to put it right into the law that you have access to an advocate You are going to get the documentation that's going to be presented against you at the hearing, at least a couple of days before the hearing, so you can review that. That the hearing officer is impartial and independent. That your decisions, your disciplinary decisions, can be reviewed by certain bodies. So you've got more due process in school discipline. I don't think this is a complete answer to the problem, but I do think this is a necessary part of the solution.
Yeah, and I would
Senator
say shout
Jeff,
out to Perry Stone Palmquist with the Student Advocacy Center, because I know, I've worked as an educational advocate, and we have the meetings in the past where we've talked about this, the need for more legislation to protect student rights, because we are seeing students that are getting, again, you have like adult laws that are being placed on children, and children are being criminalized, and that's not the way the system was supposed to be, but it's having a punitive effect on children, and that's how they get sucked into the school to prison pipeline. So I definitely applaud you for that. And I did,
Robyn, I got to jump in on this because I've just found this really interesting, that it was Columbine that really set off this whole zero tolerance policy in schools across the entire country. And what I find ironic is that, if you're not familiar with the Columbine story, a couple of affluent white kids, were the ones who were responsible, for the Columbine incident, but yet because of their actions, it resulted in these zero tolerance policies across the country and in schools, public schools, which disparately have impacted students who are Black and brown, frankly. And so I'm so glad that you, Senator Jeff, are working on this, this Student Bill of Rights that ensures due process. So kudos to you. That is fantastic.
Yeah, and the other piece of it, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tracy, but the other piece of it's really important is that we also need to make sure that if kids are pushed out, that the school districts still provide them educational supports. Because one of the things we're seeing is that the school districts, when they've got a difficult situation, it's too easy for them to kind of push that kid and that family out of their school district and, hope that they go to a different school district or hope that they go somewhere else. That's part of the problem too. We need to make it very clear and really be strenuous about enforcing the fact that they are responsible for the education of this child. And if they push them out of the in-school environment, then they're still responsible for providing educational supports in the out-of-school environment. I think if we're stronger and more stringent about requiring that to happen, we'll see less kids get pushed out anyway, because part of the incentive is, hey, we got the kid past count day, and now they're acting up. Well, if we can get rid of them, we keep the money. And, I don't think that school administrators are looking at it in that sort of awful way. I don't want to make that insinuation, but when you set up the incentives in a certain way, you're going to get certain results. And I think we should set up the incentives to get the results we want, is what I'm saying. All right. So that was my little tangent, but I did want to get back to your question, Tracy, which was about this task force, right? So I think that there's a couple things that happened here that made it successful. The number one thing and the most important thing is that attitudes are changing within the Republican and conservative movement around these issues. They're changing for a couple of reasons. They're changing, one, because they realize that the failed war on drugs is the biggest government program of all big government programs. It's the granddaddy of all failed big government programs, the war on drugs. Now that the bills are coming home, right? So that's part of it. But an even bigger part of it is that when the opioid crisis really started to hit, and the crystal meth crisis, those were white pandemics to a great extent. And they were rural pandemics to a great extent, or, public health crises, I should call them.
Right.
And, so in the 80s, when it was China White and, Young Boys Incorporated and all that, it was a lot easier for the elected leaders in Lansing to say, throw the book at them, throw them in jail forever. And, that's how we're going to solve this problem. Right. But now when it's in their backyard, it's like, oh, wait, Johnny's got a problem. Right. We can't just lock Johnny up. Johnny's a good kid. He's captain of the football team or whatever. Right. We need to give them a second chance. Well, all right, great. Well, finally you realize what's going on here. Finally, you realize that the war on drugs is a failure. Finally, you realize that we're not going to fix this problem with incarceration and badges and guns. We got to fix this problem with education and inspiration and joy, and that's what people need. All right, so anyway, that's the biggest thing. Great. It's sort of like a racial re-reckoning with substance abuse. And, I'll say it in any forum you give me an opportunity. We need to end the war on drugs. This is central to the problems we're having in the criminal justice system. It's central to the problems we're having in the healthcare system. And, you know, if we were to stop doing what we're doing now and invest all of our energy that we're putting into criminalizing drugs into providing treatment on demand, we would have less addicts, less problems, more people finding long-term recovery, more people finding productivity and joy in their lives.
Yes,
So
I agree.
those are the big things that are happening, kind of bubbling beneath the surface that's pushing them. There are also some conservative organizations like even the Koch brothers and others that are starting to fund criminal justice reform work on the right, and that has been helpful. And then also, you know, what happened was at the beginning of 2019, there were a group of us that got together and said, we want to do some aggressive things on criminal justice reform. I would give Representative David LeGrand in Grand Rapids a lot of credit. He pulled together a big criminal justice caucus in the legislature, and we had Democrats and Republicans all in the room at the same time saying, we got to do something different. And one of the first big packages that we introduced was a big package of legislation to end cash bail. And Representative LeGrand led that effort in the House. I led it in the Senate. We had a bipartisan 10-bill package introduced in both chambers with Democrats and Republicans. And then I think that, you know, the leaders of the House and Senate, the governor, and our excellent Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Bridget Berry McCormick, were all kind of talking about this at the same time. And they realized, look, rather than do this crazy plan that like folks like Irwin want, which is just to end cash bail, and that's going to be hard. Let's get all the stakeholders together, even the prosecutors who prevent all good progress in Lansing, and let's try to find out what are some of the less aggressive things that we can agree on and do. And you know what? To give credit to all the stakeholders, including the ones I just threw under the bus, the prosecutors and the sheriffs and others who tend to be on the opposite side of me on these issues, they got to the table. They did roll up their sleeves. They really did look at the data earnestly and honestly, and they agreed on a number of changes that could be made that were not as aggressive as what we were proposing with our end cash bail proposal, but that were meaningful and that were successful. Right. And so anyway, we passed kind of the first tranche of legislation from that task force. There still is another handful of bills that we're hoping to do this cycle. And I really respect the approach and the effort that some of those leaders put in. Lieutenant Governor Garland-Gilchrist, Governor Whitmer, Chief Justice McCormick were all, really strong on pushing like, hey, let's get together and let's try to do something on this. And I give them credit. I'll also give credit to their Republican majority leader and the Speaker of the House who said, yeah, we want to get something done on this. Let's really have a real task force and meeting on this. And then they followed through on letting the bills go through when they were done.
Excellent.
Yeah, we just had an expungement, Black women lawyers in Michigan. We did it in Expungement Forum, and we had some of the representatives. We had Representative David LeGrand, and so and it was Rep Ronnie that did an expungement event last year, and that's how I first met Representative David LeGrand, and with Representative Tanisha Yancey with she's got her own personal testimony about these laws and things of that nature, which is very powerful. And I know we're getting pressed for time, and we are going to have you as a part of the forum on March 27th from 12 to 2. But I do want to ask you, because one of the things that has come up, I mean, clean slate legislation is great, but there are still folks that are being left out. And I know that there are in other states, you have governors that have done mass pardons, like 1,200. They did it in California and in Virginia. So what I would ask you is, what efforts are being made as far as the governor, Big Gretch, if you will, and the lieutenant governor to do mass pardons for people that maybe it's 20, 30 years and maybe they don't qualify under this new legislation? And or even I know Representative LeGrand said I should bring in the person, the Miss Welcome, Ed Welcome, to talk about operating while intoxicated, because it's like, if you have, I have clients, they have one drunk driving from 20, 30 years ago, and it should not be a life sentence, but in some cases it is. So the question I have to you is, State Senator Jeff Irwin, is, do you know what efforts are being made to do mass pardons of people that don't qualify for clean slate, but still should be redeemed. They should have redemption because they're human just like everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll start with the pardons and commutations process, and then I'll get to sort of the legislative side of the question. I can't speak for any other legislators or the governor certainly, but I can tell you that I have personally made a number of pardon and commutation requests of the governor. I think that there are a lot of people in our prisons right now who meet the criteria that you just mentioned, Robyn. They are not going to ever be eligible for parole, or they're not now, but their circumstances are very compelling for a number of reasons. One group of people that I think is a really good example of this are, we have a number of women down here at Women's Heron Valley, right here in Washtenaw County, who are in prison. They've been there for 20 or 30 years, and they have no chance of parole, and they ought to be let go. And here's why. If you look at their case, what happened was sometime in the 80s or something like that, they either murdered or hired someone to murder their abuser. And were they guilty? It sounds like it. They were convicted. Did they deserve to go to prison? Yeah, probably, right? And they certainly have been there for a long time. But if those cases were tried today, they would have never gotten the sentences that these women got. They would have gotten a different sort of sentence. They would have gotten a different sort of justice. And what I'm asking the governor to do is to look at these circumstances and provide these women with the kind of justice that they deserve and that the public deserves on their behalf, right? If you've got someone who fits this bill and they've been there for 20, 30 years and they've done good time and they've done their programming and they have a high likelihood of success on the outside, let's let these women go. They don't need to be there any longer. They've been punished more than they ought to have been probably in the first place, in my view. And so I've represented that in detail to the administration around some cases, and we're working on more as we speak. We also encourage them to look at not just the ones that we're pointing out to them individually that have very compelling individual stories, but there's thousands. There's probably about 5,000 people that are in MDOC custody right now that are there on long, indeterminate sentences or life sentences that have been there for 20 years or more and who are over 55 and have an extremely low likelihood of reoffending. And they ought to be let out. Now, legislatively, we passed a medically frail release bill last year. I voted for it, but it was not a very good bill. We need to go back and we need to expand that to give the parole board more authorities to release people who are medically frail. The way it works now in Michigan, to be released for being medically frail, you have to be on death's door. I think we need to expand that a little bit more. We also need to go back and expand the expungement to allow for an expungement of a first-time DUI if approved by the judge. We passed that bill last year and the governor vetoed it.
Right.
I expect that bill is going to go forward again. Well, I don't know if she'll veto it this time, but I think that in her veto message, she said that she just wanted it to be done in the open and give the advocates on the other side a chance to fight it. It was kind of done very quickly at the end, and I don't know if she'll sign it, but I suspect that she might. I certainly voted for it. I think if you've got a first-time DUI, you should be able to go back in front of a judge and argue your case. There are other folks, though, that were left out of the Clean Slate bill, and I made a lot of noise about it when the bills were passing, but wasn't able to get some changes. So we did pass some legislation around Clean Slate that allowed people with use and possession of cannabis to get their records expunged.
Right.
But we didn't do anything for folks with possession with intent to deliver or manufacture, despite the fact that those things are now legal. And I think that we needed to provide an open door for those folks. So what I was proposing is to handle it similarly to how I proposed we handled the DUI cases, which is not necessarily to make them automatic, but at least give them a chance to get in front of their judge and to say, hey, look, I've got this felony for manufacture of marijuana because I was growing 6 plants. And by the way, it's now legal for me to grow 12. So now that we've changed the law, can we get this released? So that would have been good. And we're going to go back and see if we can't get that done in the future. The biggest one, though, that I made amendments on and was incredibly frustrated that we couldn't get in here is that Clean Slate applies to non-assaultive crimes. When we think of non-assaultive crimes, we're usually thinking of, like murder and sexual assault and all these, assaultive crimes. But one of the things that got coded as assaultive that I was trying to get out of there is resisting and obstructing. Resisting and obstructing arrest is a routinely charged felony in Washtenaw County.
Right.
The way that has been handled by police and prosecutors has changed dramatically over the years, right? When we were all kids, they didn't charge R&O unless you were really resisting, unless you were really trying to get away. And nowadays they charge R&O even if someone you grab their arm and they jerk away. That's a reaction. That's a natural reaction, right? And I don't think that people should be carrying a criminal record for that reaction. And plus we also have fleeing and eluding, and we have assaulting an officer. We have all these other crimes out there to sort of suss out, when people are really running, when people are really evading arrest versus someone who just didn't know it was an officer behind them who grabbed them and, reacted. And so, and also, someone's getting spread out on the hood of their car. There's a difference between really fighting the police and, just being unhappy about getting arrested. And I think that far too many people are doing, we know how prosecutors do it. They throw the kitchen sink at people at the charging phase.
I hope something.
And so this is an overcharged crime. R&O is overcharged dramatically. And so I tried to get it out of the assaultive crime definition so it could be included in Clean Slate, but I was unsuccessful with that. So yeah, I hope that covers it. But yeah, there's still more work to be done in this case with Clean Slate. There's still more to be done to expand this, but I don't want to dwell on the things we didn't get done last year because we did make tremendous progress despite some of these pieces that still need attention.
You made phenomenal progress. And before you run, and I know you've got to run, but I practice in the juvenile court like 5 days a week. And one thing that I just hate to see is these low-level, juvenile offenders, if you will, who have been detained in a juvenile detention facility, and they're coming in these shackles. There's so many states that are doing these anti-shackling laws. What's the chance of Michigan doing the same thing? Anti-shackling for juvenile detainees.
And I've seen it too, shackling of their hands and their feet. It's like, it makes me, again, when I started doing criminal justice reform, coming into the criminal justice courts, in the adult courts, you see people packed into the jails. It's making me think of like a slave ship. And then in the juvenile court, when you see kids shackled with their hands and their feet, it's making me think of slavery too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work more on that issue. I think that it prejudices the court against these defendants as well. And this is something that needs to be done. We have been doing some work on trying to work on the issue of like shackling of pregnant inmates, but we haven't done anything yet in the courtroom, and I appreciate you raising it because that's an important issue, and I have heard this raised by other attorneys and other people who work in the juvenile court on both sides of the desk, saying that this really isn't necessary. There's probably a way to limit it dramatically at a very minimum, if not eliminate it completely.
Right. I mean, I can see you do need to make precautions with the juveniles and adults. If somebody is if they might have an outburst, they're going to be violent. Maybe you need to do Zoom. Maybe we need Zoom for that. Okay, that don't even bring them out. But for the ones that are not, most of them are not. Then you bring them in there like that. It's insane. And then what necessary. Right. And when you say R&O too, that's one of my pet peeves about R&O, the resisting obstructing. That's like an add-on. Most of the public, they don't know that when they get arrested, that if they pull away, that they can be charged. And you're getting a felony, you get a felony for that. And that we could talk about CCW, but I know we're gonna have you come on March 27th. So we'll have some more to talk about. So we definitely want to thank you for coming out and joining us for Political Coffee.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and I got my mug.
Thank you, Senator Jeff.
And thank you for the work that you're doing in courtrooms all across the state. People need capable, aggressive, smart representation. So thank you for that. And also thank you for the ways that you've helped my office, right? Robyn, you mentioned earlier that we had talked several times throughout the course of the last couple of years about these expungement bills and how to make them better and sort of what the needs of defendants are. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate, the specific help you've given me in my office and the work that you're doing in the community to make sure that people have solid advocates, because, we have an adversarial system for better or for worse. And we need to have capable people working on both sides of that and doing it diligently and honestly.
Well, thank you.
Thank
you
for
all you do. Yeah, thank you. And and we're going to have you, as I said, everybody, folks, March 27th, Tracy and I will be talking about, the Clean Slate legislation. We've invited state reps, state senator. We have state Senator Jeff Irwin coming in to talk about, to just have a candid discussion about this clean slate legislation, to talk about the legislative intent and actual implementation. So Senator Jeff, I know the convention is going on, so I don't know, you may have to get back to that, but thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and I hope you have a blessed day.
Thank you, Senator Jeff. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate you and all your great work.
Thank you.
Keep fighting.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep fighting a
Thanks,
good fight.
Thank you. Thanks. Couldn't do it without you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know
Wow.
that, yeah, we've had that was exciting. We had Judge Lloyd and Senator Irwin, State Senator Irwin, and I know we've got a really exciting lineup next week. We got Anthony Adams.
Oh yeah, that's going to be interesting. He's running for mayor. People say, oh, now we really have a mayoral race on in Detroit, because Anthony Adams, a former deputy mayor of Detroit, has thrown his towel in the ring, so to speak. The filing deadline is a few weeks away, but he says he's gonna get out there, and he's running already. He's running already. So that's going to be a fascinating interview. 2 p.m. next Saturday.
And then we've got
Anthony
attorney,
Adams.
yep, and then we've got attorney Wendy Barnwell, who's been practicing for 33 years. She's a criminal defense
Legendary.
attorney. She's an appellate attorney.
Yes.
She's had very successful appeals. She is a crusader for justice. So folks, we're definitely, she's very feisty. You'll see some fireworks with her. So we're definitely gonna have a jam-packed show next week. And so, yeah.
And then the expungement forum. And who else do we have participating in the expungement forum? Do you know?
We have Victoria Burton-Harris has confirmed, and Representative Ronnie Peterson. I believe we did hear back from Representative Yusuf Rabi, and so we're reaching out to some other folks. So yeah, we'll get that finalized and get the flyer out. And yeah, I think that's exciting. Again, folks, we want to make sure you get the knowledge here first. Knowledge is power with Political Coffee. And I know I have Robyn L, and I know Tracy she has her podcast and her shows as well. So we want to make sure everybody has this knowledge, because knowledge is power. And it's a pandemic. I don't know. We got so many layers. We got a pandemic going on. We got racial issues going on. Police
economic issues. I mean, I saw you posted up that article about that study that came out that showed that black people specifically, I think it's black and brown people, were charged at a higher rate when driving while black and brown through the city of Dearborn in Michigan. I mean, that's something that people always talked about, but now, I mean, we've got some hard data on it, that it's true, not just an urban myth. Okay, it exists. So yeah, please like and subscribe to Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracy. We've got our brand new YouTube channel. We're going to be rolling out a website. We're going to be rolling out some merch, and we've got an exciting lineup of great guests for you that really it's all about, as Attorney McCoy said, personal empowerment, because as Attorney McCoy says, knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. And we've got Lanita Baker coming on.
Oh yes,
March 13th.
I can't wait for that one.
Who is one of the lead attorney for Breonna Taylor, and so she's an active member of the National Bar Association. So definitely. We have some wonderful, amazing civil rights attorneys out there, Ben Crump and Lee Merritt, Chris Stewart, but we've got some women that are coming out there and getting involved. We need more Black woman power out there, helping to carry the torch. Or I was a track runner, so take the baton and make sure that making sure that Black folks are getting justice, Black, brown, Hispanic, Asian. I just posted, I don't know if you saw on the news, they were talking about there's been an increase of violence against Asian folk. And I mean, this is just, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's really impacted the Chinese New Year celebrations. It's the year of the ox. I saw the Tiffany Cross show, part of it earlier today, and she had API activists, Asian Pacific Islander activists on, and talking about these assaults on people of Asian descent because of the pandemic situation. People are just taking it out on them indiscriminately, and that is wrong. It's, you know, just dead wrong. You can't have that. We're, you know, this is supposed to be America, a civilized society. And in many ways, I'm just seeing the opposite, you know, back to what happened on January 6th at the Capitol in DC. I mean, you know, what is going on out here? And then, you know, these politicians that are shirking their duties. You know, we've seen just the opposite with State Senator Jeff Irwin today. I mean, a man who is just doing tremendous things up in Lansing compared to Texas Senator, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, Cruz, who went on a vacation in Cancun while his constituents are suffering with no water, no electricity, no food. I mean, go figure.
And he's gonna blame his daughter. I can't believe that he's gonna blame his daughter. That is ridiculous. You are the parent. She is a child. You can't blame your, come on. You know, it's just, you go out of town, and that's just, and I have relatives there in Texas, and, you know, shout out to my family in Texas, and hopefully you guys are getting your water on and electricity, heat, and all that. And but it's like he just goes to Cancun, and it's just, again, there are just some people that should not be in office. We need to have grown-ups in office, not people that are just living it up and having a party while the rest of us are out here just trying to struggle to survive. It's just
yeah. And, you know, Robyn, if it had been a Democrat who did the same thing, of course, we would criticize that individual. But, you know, in contrast, Beto O'Rourke, he made, I understand, up to 200,000 calls, you know, to try to get some resources for people in Texas. And back to Ted Cruz, I understand that was pre-booked trip, you know, pre-planned trip. And his wife could have, you know, dropped off the girls to go to Cancun if they wanted to get away. He needed to stay in his home state of Texas to help the people, because do you see the video, the footage from Texas? I mean, it looks like a dystopian world. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
It's crazy. And then AOC, you know, that you see some of the folks trying to blame her, but she comes all the way. She's not even out. She's not even a representative.
Volunteered.
She raised $1 million
and raised all that money. So yeah, I know. There's been some criticisms of AOC lately, but I've really got to commend her for doing that. She volunteered, and like you said, raised millions of dollars, you know, on behalf of the people of the state of Texas. And I've got a cousin out there, Ron Levi. Shout out to him and his family. He says he's safe and sound. He's got a new grandbaby, so it's good to hear that they're doing okay. But you know, it's interesting because the state of Texas is on a separate power grid from the rest of the country under this Federal Power Act. They wanted to be independent, but I believe in climate change, and I think that with the change in climate, they're going to have to reconsider their position. You know, I heard one of the failures involved a lack of winterization of their infrastructure, but with this changing climate, I mean, they've got to be on top of it. So I fought the governor for that, Greg Abbott, and you know, there've been calls for impeaching Greg Abbott and you know, for Cruz to resign. But hey, maybe Matthew McConaughey will seriously take a run at running for governor of Texas. I don't know if you heard the rumors about that last. Yeah, you know, the actor, was he in Mississippi Burning? He's been in a lot of great stuff.
He's been in a lot. Legends of the, not Legends of the Fall, that's Brad Pitt, but he's been in a lot of progressive movies, like thought-provoking movies. He just wrote a book. So yeah, I think that would be very cool to have him come out. And you know, his wife is Brazilian, and yeah, so I think that would be cool to have. We need to have compassionate leaders in this country. You don't just want to have people that are wealthy, that are out there collecting a check.
And
you
out
need
of
to have
touch.
people, out of touch. You need to have people that are gonna get out there and get their hands dirty and help folks. I mean, it's just, you know, they talked about the pandemic, that there's a racial reckoning, you know, with the way Black.
Senator Jeff mentioned that, and I believe, you know, yeah, he's right. I thank him for mentioning that there is a racial reckoning going on in the country, and some people just can't deal with it. But it is Black History Month, and I do want to mention before we go, because I was reminded of this from Rita White that there's an event happening tomorrow after the Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan meeting. Is it a special presentation?
Yes, we have Mark Fancher, who is an ACLU attorney. He also is a professor at EMU. And so he is going to be talking about Black women in history and Black women in the law. And so that'll be available. You can watch it on the Black Women Lawyers Facebook page. And then, of course, I'm sure we'll put it on our YouTube. And so, yeah, Mark is just an amazing Black historian. He
used to be my boss at the Sugar Law Center. I was
okay.
a law clerk at the Sugar Law Center. And I learned a lot from him about the Federal WARN Act, which says that, if workers going to be laid off, their employer has to, warn them, give them 60 days notice, not just say, oh, get out of here, I'm closing up shop, and just leave them twisting in the wind. So kudos to Mark Fancher. Yeah, I'm going to be in on the meeting, the BLAM meeting. I've got my old emeritus badge here. And
that'll be great. And he's done some programming on racial profiling. I've had him on some of my panels on what to do when stopped by the police. So I anticipate I'll be doing some more stuff, and with Robyn Legal too. And I definitely want to have I know I talked to Sergeant Eugene Rush about having him come out and talk about the gun issue, like how to properly have a gun. You can have a gun in your home and in your business, but you can't carry a gun in your car. You have to carry it a certain way. You can't just have it out without having a license to carry, because those of us that are criminal defense attorneys, we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of cases across the state where people are getting charged and they're like, I thought it was open carry. Okay, well, it's open carry in certain aspects, but you can't just have a gun
into your car. You have to take that firearm off and put it in your trunk. Okay, that's how people, especially Black and brown people, get caught up with the open carry law in Michigan. I am for the Second Amendment. I'm totally for it. I think we should actually have constitutional carry. But can you imagine, how, Black people, look at Philando Castile was legally carrying and he lost his life.
Right.
This is a total double standard. That's a whole nother show. We got to talk about that. Yeah. Just, terrible when you think about it. And I hope that we can get Attorney Ben Crump to come on and give us an update on his new projects, because I saw him on Reverend Al Sharpton's show talking about his new documentary on Nichelle Nichols, who, starred on Star Trek back in the 60s as Lieutenant Uhura. And a lot of people don't understand and realize, I've got Attorney Ben Crump's book here, Robyn. I don't know if you can see it from the green screen, but Lieutenant Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols, I mean, she was this Black science officer who served on the bridge. You would never see Black women in those roles. And she was really a pioneer and groundbreaking. And one time, she really got fed up with the whole Star Trek thing because of the things that were going on behind the scenes. And she wanted to quit. And Dr. Martin Luther King reached out to Nichelle Nichols and said, no, please don't quit, because you don't realize what a wonderful role model you are for children, all children, and Black children, and little Black girls. And we need to see you on this show, because that was a groundbreaking show. It featured the first interracial kiss back in the 60s between Lieutenant Uhura and Captain Kirk, and they didn't even show that episode in the South, because they were affronted by that. But Attorney Benjamin Crump is working on a documentary about Nichelle Nichols, the actress, and I just would love to hear more about that and what's going on with his cases.
Yeah, and I know he's even has a young man that was you can go on his website. They were talking about a young man that was Asian that was having some mental health issues, and they called the police and they came out and he got killed, and then he was adopted, and it was just a tragedy. And we definitely need to make sure that we're keeping aware of these. We're talking to the Crusaders for Justice, like Ben Crump and Lanita Baker, Lee Merritt, Kristen Stewart, Royce Russell, that are just out there that are making a difference and on the front lines for folks that are people that are in need, Black folk, Asian folk, all of that, because it's just, we've got to make change in this society. And yeah, as I said, it's just, there needs to be, we need to weed out these folks that are just out here just to make a buck. It's just, that's just not, no, forget about that. That the people deserve better. They deserve people that really are caring and compassionate, like Judge Lloyd. We just heard Judge Lloyd, and we heard Senator Jeff Irwin. You can tell Judge Lloyd's been dedicated to helping people, the people in the community, as well as Senator Jeff Irwin. We need more people like that. So,
Right.
yes. All right, everybody. So this has been Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracy. I want to give a shout out. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to my dad, Robert McCoy. Happy birthday. His birthday was February 18th.
Attorney McCoy.
Yes, and also we want to shout out or dedicate the show to Cliff Woodard, who was an amazing attorney. He was just, it's just so sad. It's hard to believe. I was in court the other day, and when we found out about it, it's just crazy to think that he could be gone like that.
Yeah, you never know. And, Attorney Cliff Woodard's, actually, he was my predecessor. I was his successor on a local radio station, and I'm not going to mention the name of the station, but that's another story. But Cliff Woodard's used to do the training, the PowerPoint training for the Wayne County Criminal Defense Bar Association, and everybody knew Cliff Woodard's, and he was feisty, he had some opinions not everybody agreed with, but he got you thinking, he
like
got
Andy
you thinking.
Rooney. Yeah.
Yes, like Andy Rooney. And I do want to say this, that, formerly we had a guest on our show, hotshot attorney Arnold Reed, who talked extensively last year about activism and criminal justice reform and some of his big cases and the likelihood of real criminal justice reform in America in light of the George Floyd incident. And as I understand it, Attorney Reed is now representing the estate of the late Attorney Cliff Woodard's in a wrongful death lawsuit in regards to the circumstances that led to his death. So I find that very interesting. And I know that the estate of Cliff Woodard's and his daughter will be well represented.
Right, for sure. So yes, we probably should have Attorney Reed come back and give us an update as well. So
yes.
All right. Well, everybody have a blessed Saturday. And we'll see you next Saturday at 2:00 on Political Coffee with Robyn
Anthony Adams and Wendy Burnwell. See you guys.
Wendy Burnwell.
Bye, Robyn.
See you later, Tracy.
See ya.